Reborn as the Viking Pirate King. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 1 AD 793. The heavy axe wedged itself into the enemy's skull, a stream of crimson blood spurting out, splashing onto Loki's pale cheek. This was the last Slavic warrior defending the village. Standing on the head, which resembled a shattered blood bag, Loki pulled out his axe and kicked open the village gate. Two simultaneous cries of surprise echoed from within and without. One side was cheering, the other, naturally, screaming in agony. The cheers came from the Vikings behind Loki. They had joined Duke Bernard's fleet, braved the winds and waves for thousands of miles, just for this moment. Over 20 fully armed men, axes raised, charged into the village. Only Loki turned to gaze at his comrades, fallen in the brutal battle. 1, 2, 3, 5 more of his men had perished in the struggle to capture the village. Ever since his father's death 2 years prior, Loki had shouldered the heavy responsibility of leading the village. Nestled in the cold mountains of Scandinavia, his village, Hanshu village, was the smallest of the valley nobles led by Duke Bernard. The village consisted of only 42 households and a population of just over 100. The small population was only one factor. The village itself was situated on a rocky hill. Beyond the village lay only a few acres of barren, salt alkali land, and the wheat produced from the cultivated land was barely enough to feed over 100 hungry people. To survive, the tribesmen had to rely on hunting deep into the snow-capped mountains. In good years with abundant rain, the mountains offered ample game, allowing the hunters to not only fill their stomachs but also trade their furs for weapons and clothing. In years of disaster, like this one, they were forced to join the Duke's raiding parties, sailing across the Baltic Sea with his private army aboard Viking longships to plunder Slavic lands. Their survival through the winter depended entirely on the amount of supplies they could plunder from the Slavic lands. The village was guarded by teenagers. Seeing their situation hopeless, they dropped their pitchforks and hoes and fled. Loki's Vikings didn't pursue. The god King Odin preferred the clash of swords and axes to one-sided slaughter. More interested than the deserters, these tall, blonde raiders were the women of the village. Search for gold, silver, copper, iron, wheat, grain, cotton, linen, animal skins, and winter clothing. Winter has arrived too early this year. We need everything to keep warm and fill our stomachs, and load the women and children onto the wagons. No one may harm them, and those who disobey will be killed. He repeated the same instructions several times a year. Loki was a time traveler. However, after surviving for over 20 years in the poverty and cold of the Middle Ages, he seemed to have forgotten that he once came from a prosperous and civilized world. In his previous life, killing strangers and robbing their women and children was a heinous crime that ordinary people would never dare to think of. Yet, in this new world, he was surprised to find that women and children didn't seem to mind being carried away on the shoulders of strangers. A wise bird chooses a good tree to roost in. Women seek men for a better life. In these difficult times of scarcity and hunger, if these strong pirates wielding great axes can bring them a better life and allow their offspring to grow up more safely, then following them seems reasonable. Damn it! We come to this god-forsaken place every year. Can't we rob another village? Inside the dilapidated wooden house, a tall Viking warrior was rummaging through the kitchen, loading salted fish into a bearskin bag he carried with him. Beside him, another man, with deep blue eyes, carefully scanned the room for any hidden doors. Having been robbed so many times, the rough Slavic warrior had learned how to hide his belongings. My dear brother, you're dreaming. Duke Bernard had already staked out each clan's territory before we set out. Entering another village's hunting grounds is like picking someone's wallet. To acquire more hunting grounds, you have to pay the earl. Not to mention that wealthy towns have strong guards, but with only 30-something axes, what if we run into a few chosen ones? Haha. We'll be wiped out. Loki shook his head slightly. In the medieval world, feudal superstition reigned supreme. In this barbaric era where 95% of humanity was illiterate, only the word gods could explain all the problems. Thunder, they believed, was Thor hammering away at the iron. Rain, they believed, was the gods mating. The arrival of winter was the gods' dormancy, and the beginning of spring was their awakening. The god King Odin was the source of power for the Vikings. Odin controls Valhalla, where 12 deities are enshrined. These deities grant the Vikings 8 distinct upgrade paths: Sea Giant, Siren, Thor, Mariner, Berserker, Fisherman, Raven, and Valkyrie. It's said that reaching a high level on each path grants devastating power. The Vikings swear by this. However, after 20 years of living, Loki still believes this is all just feudal superstition. This is partly because the impoverished village of Frostwater lacks a single chosen one. In those 20 years, he's never witnessed any of these chosen ones display any magical abilities. Furthermore, becoming a chosen one requires paying a substantial sum of money to the storm priests who guard Valhalla. To modern eyes, this reeks of an ancient pyramid scheme. Loki's Viking warriors are mediocre in combat. Even calling them Vikings was an exaggeration. Ultimately, they were just a bunch of improvised, armed hunters. With a hoe, they were farmers; with a bow and arrow, they were hunters; with an axe, they sailed across the seas; they became pirates. As two of their tribesmen looted, a Slavic woman in coarse cloth stood behind them, making no attempt to resist. She clutched her 2 children tightly, her head lowered, not daring to meet the bandits' gaze. "Don't forget to take the women and children with you. Otherwise, they'll die this winter without food. Just tie up the women. Have them hold the children's hands, so they don't strangle them." "Okay, boss, I won't hurt them." Loki, axe in hand, retreated from the room. Over 20 years later, he realized the movie scenes of women being forcibly abducted were completely fake. Warmth is the key to sexual desire. With no food to eat, these pale-faced Viking warriors focused only on food. Even a corncob dried for years was better in their eyes than a group of withered women, thin as firewood. In one respect, his men were right. Duke Bernard, Lord of the River Valley, owned over 30 Viking longships, yet he knew only one route, to the east. While traveling east was safe, years of plunder had left these Slavs even poorer than the Vikings themselves. This year in particular, they had plundered 7 or 8 villages. And many had died, yet Loki hadn't seen a single drop of gold, and only a pound of silver in all. He always had dried corn and worm-eaten potatoes, but they were only enough to fill his stomach. He needed real money to rent more ships from the Duke and buy larger hunting grounds. With larger hunting grounds, he could plunder more gold and silver, and with more gold and silver, he could build villages, forge weapons, and train an army of professional soldiers. Take what you need, and leave 3 or 5 tribesmen to escort the women and children to the ship. Too many people froze to death last winter, and we need to replenish the population. Don't fucking forget the children. Any child needs to eat a lot of food to grow up. These Slavic bastards have helped us complete half of the work. It is only reasonable for us to help them complete the second half. Deal with the elderly who cannot move on the spot, and don't let them suffer. In the Middle Ages, when supplies were scarce, it was a fight to the death. Maybe in the first few years he would feel sympathy for the old man, but after killing so many people, he got used to it. Walking slowly in the dilapidated village, he saw bag after bag of food being carried to the carriage by burly Viking men. However, just as he was about to leave the village, a tall Viking boy kicked the wooden door with a bang. He pulled out a skinny old man in a coarse robe from the empty barn. The old man was not young anymore. He raised his hands and spoke in a foreign language. However, these 2 sentences with ordinary pronunciation sounded like thunder in Loki's ears. The old man uttered 2 standard English sentences, please and don't. 20 years have passed, and this is the first time he has heard the language from his previous life in this strange world. Wait! Loki roared. The young hunter was about to kill the old man with a knife, but he immediately put down the weapon when he heard the leader's order. He walked quickly to the old man, gently grabbed the coarse cloth necklace around his neck and pulled it out. He saw a wooden cross. This white-robed monk turned out to be a missionary who believed in the holy bishop. Newcomer, please collect and recommend. Chapter 2, Overall Map of the World. Loki hadn't been a brilliant scholar in his previous life, but thanks to the Red Kingdom's comprehensive 9-year compulsory education, he still clearly understood the meaning of these 2 English phrases. His subordinates looked at him hesitantly, but Loki cautiously helped the elderly missionary to his feet. A closer look revealed him to be a man between 40 and 50 years old. He stood only 5 feet tall, with brown hair and dark eyes. His appearance alone was strikingly different from the tall, pale Slavs of this land. The missionary was dressed in a thin, coarse linen tunic. He was unarmed, but clutched tightly in his arms was a thick, seemingly valuable book. Loki snatched it away, noticing how worn it looked. The cover was a greasy, blackened sheepskin, and the inner pages were made entirely of brittle papyrus. A slight shake of the book seemed to shatter in the cold wind. However, what caught his attention even more was the line of traditional regular script on the cover of this ancient book. A general map of the world, 3 small characters followed, volume 15. Upon opening the book, the inner pages were filled with vivid maps outlined in gold powder and silver thread. Loki was astonished. In an age without printing, all books were hand-drawn. And among all these hand-drawn books, the most precious were the travelogues that recorded the routes of those who had traveled and what they had seen and heard along the way. Cartography is a profound science. In an era when humans could not fly like birds, completely and accurately mapping coastlines was extremely difficult. The ancestral home in Hanshu village housed several parchment scrolls drawn by wanderers, but those were less maps than a collection of vague directions formed by arrows. The maps in this tattered ancient book were quite different. Although these maps only depicted the corners of a continent, the coastline of this localized area was accurately depicted. Even the islands, the fish and monsters in the sea, and the products of different land areas were clearly marked. The old priest struggled to take the ancient book back from Loki, but was mercilessly kicked to the ground by Loki. From now on, I ask, and you speak. Otherwise, I don't mind sending you to see God immediately. You can speak English. My God, I actually met a barbarian who can communicate with me in English, the old priest cried out in shock, but Loki slapped him back to consciousness. Remember, I'm not a barbarian. First question, what's your name? Your Excellency, you can call me Father Ward. Could you please return the book to me first? This is a map drawn by those flying sword cultivators of the Eastern Tang dynasty, soaring through the sky on their flying swords. The text is in Tang language, you can't understand it? Loki was the first barbarian old Ward had seen who even remotely resembled the word civilized. After hearing his name, he temporarily forgot his fear and only wanted to reclaim his book. Get lost. Seeing the old priest reach out his withered hands to grab the atlas, Loki kicked him to the ground again. Are there any other missionaries like you around? No, I'm the only one left. The others are all dead. Mentioning his fallen companions, Ward's eyes once again flashed with confusion and fear. His trembling hands involuntarily grasped the wooden cross on his chest, and at that moment, Loki was surprised to find that his dark gray, coarse cloth robes were covered in dried blood. The cold and icy chill masked the stench of rancid blood. But the dark red clots clung to his clothing, making the soft linen feel like cardboard. Where are you from? Why have you come to the land of the Slavs? Even in late autumn, this man was still wearing a thin summer robe. After he was pulled from the barn, though his cheeks and ears were red from the cold, he didn't even shiver from the cold. Only the dead could suppress their bodies' instinctive warnings in such cold. This wasn't normal. I, at the Pope's command, lead the Templars across the sea to search for the evil temple left behind by the Old Ones. Using the map drawn in this book, Loki tore his gaze from his blood-stained robes and locked eyes with his black eyes. Yes, judging from your behavior, you didn't find it. No, on the icy shores of Murmansk, we encountered a giant monster left behind from prehistoric times. Everyone died, but I, barely able to mount an old horse, wandered aimlessly and found this remote village. Loki nodded. Haha. Indecision, mysterious creatures. These 8 words were particularly useful in the Middle Ages. Last question. Are you from England? The previous questions were just prelude and idle chatter. This was the one Loki most wanted to know. Before his time travel, his knowledge of Eastern European history was limited to a smattering. Even so, he knew that the Vikings made their fortune by plundering England. However, almost all Viking lords adhered to one truth: west of the North Sea, there was only sea, no land. Loki didn't know how different the world map in this dimension was from what he had seen in his previous life. Today, he finally caught a tongue. He first needed to find out if the English Isles existed in this dimension. As long as England existed, it meant there was land west of the Scandinavian peninsula. With this information, all I need to do is build a few ships and sail west from the North Sea. I'll find myself in a new hunting ground far richer than even Eastern Russia. No need for rationing, no need for commissions, the entire hunting ground is mine. Yes, my lord, I hail from the kingdom of Northumbria, west of the West English Isles. Loki clapped his hands, stuffed the ancient book into his satchel, and smiled with satisfaction. "Brothers, hurry up and plunder. We'll call it a day and return, boss." "Why, yes, we still have 3 days until the Duke's return date. We can easily reach the next village and make a killing." The Vikings were born warriors. According to their belief, only warriors who died in battle could ascend to Valhalla after death, where they could drink wine with the gods. For every Viking raider, dying on the battlefield with a great axe was a great honor. None of them feared death, but Loki, a staunch atheist, didn't see it that way. Conserve strength and strive for development. Every Chi countryman has a deep and profound understanding of these 8 words. Through 3 generations of unremitting efforts, they have witnessed a poor country with nothing rise to become the world's largest power. This wasn't bestowed by some ethereal deity, but rather the hard-working people's wisdom, diligence, and blood and sweat. Only a little over 170 people remain in the village. This winter's raids have already claimed the lives of 10 young and able-bodied men, leaving fewer than 40 hunters capable of fighting. If another 10 or 8 die in the next battle, how will they hunt next year, and how will they participate in the next raid? Moreover, I've captured an English missionary, the most valuable trophy of this raid. I have a tongue and a Chinese map. Next year, I will find a way to lead my people across the North Sea to the English Isles to plunder the truly wealthy nobles. In a previous life, these bastards used opium to knock down the door of the impoverished Qing dynasty. In this life, I will plow your ancestors with axes and fire, and let you know what it means to be robbers from the West. Let me explain. If you were lucky enough to travel back to the 8th century, the British Isles would still speak Old English. Old English is completely different from Modern English. Modern English is a hybrid of French and Old English. Some Old English words are still used today. For example, lamb is Old English, mutton is Modern English. The real history is not very interesting. The history written by the Qingliu people is much more exciting. Chapter 3 Homecoming. When the hunters from Hanshu village returned to the coast, over 30 slender longboats lined up neatly on the shore. A dozen towering Viking warriors in fine steel armor stood guard beside the ships. These Vikings appeared ordinary, but in reality they were chosen by Valhalla to cultivate the sea giant order. They were a precious force that Duke Bernard usually refused to use. To train these dozen chosen, he had to select hundreds of strong warriors from the inhabitants of his domain and send them to Valhalla, nestled in the mountains, at a significant expense. After long periods of training, battle, and prayer, they would be granted the potion that would allow them to enter the sea giant path by the storm acolytes who guarded the temple. However, obtaining the potion was only the beginning. The sea giant was the most physically powerful of the 8 upgrade paths in Valhalla. After consuming the potion, nearly 70% of the Viking warriors would be unable to withstand the violent impact of the potion and would explode and die. The remaining 30% would undergo a complete transformation. Their height would exceed 2 meters, and their strength would become greater than that of ordinary humans. Duke Bernard left only a dozen or so men to guard the ship, sufficient to ensure safety. Leading the charge was none other than Blind Mountain Blood Pigeon, the captain of the garrison, who had reached the Sequence 7 Wavabreaker stage. He was also the young lord of Blood Pigeon Town, the largest village in the river valley. "Brother Blind Mountain, thank you for your hard work." Loki looked up at his towering figure, standing at a full 2.5 meters tall, and tossed a modest purse from his pocket. This was an unspoken rule among Viking raiders. Returning pirates would receive a share of the spoils from the guards guarding the ship. Blind Mountain grabbed it, laughed heartily, waited, and tossed it back to Loki. "My dear brother Loki, everyone knows that the hunting grounds of Hanshu village are the most barren of the mountain tribes. Others rob the rich peasants and nobles, but you're robbing exiles and barbarians. Earning a few coins isn't easy, so keep them for yourself." Loki's lips curled up in a kind smile. "A few ounces of silver are useless to me. It's more important that Blind Mountain brother collect enough money and go to Valhalla to exchange for the Sequence 6 Storm Warrior potion as soon as possible." The young man from the Red Country, Loki, was a deep-rooted atheist. In his view, Odin, Loki, and the Valkyries were all pyramid schemes fabricated by the storm acolytes of Valhalla. Drinking potions to gain power was sheer nonsense. Remember, those entering the temple were children as young as 12 or 13. With adequate nutrition, the Viking genes of this age would grant them tall stature and great strength. There was no need to drink the dangerous potion that was like poison. Loki walked over to Blind Mountain and stuffed the animal skin purse into his pocket. He also took a large bag of liquor from the carriage behind him and handed it to him. "Blind Mountain, Blood Pigeon, was one of the few brothers Loki had in this cold, alien world. He was usually very kind to Loki. Blood Pigeon Town and Hanshu village were separated by only a shallow ravine. As a fellow sea dweller among the Vikings, Blind Mountain served as the hunting captain of the Blood Pigeon tribe and had never crossed the border into the Hanshu village forests for many years. In years of disaster, he would even intentionally or unintentionally drive some of their uneaten prey into the Hanshu village forests for the Hanshu hunters to hunt. Loki's next step was to find a route to the English Isles, and strong and loyal thugs were essential. Blind Mountain, Blood Pigeon, was the first person on his list. There are still 2 days until the return date. In all my years, I've only seen pirates arrive late. Returning 2 days early like you is rare. After accepting the money, Blind Mountain casually grabbed 3 animal hide bags filled with provisions and helped them load them onto the boat. With 2 days left, why don't we go catch a shark for a treat? After all the cargo was loaded onto the longboat, Blind Mountain stood on the shore, gazing at the setting sun and lighting a nearby campfire. No, my family is full of elderly, women, and children. We'd better return early with the provisions so the women in the village can rest assured, but you don't have a navigator from the sailor path. Aren't you afraid of getting lost in the dark sea? Don't worry, my brother. It's not only the chosen ones who know how to sail. Tonight, the sky is clear, and the stars will show me the way home. The starry sky in the other world was no different from before the time travel. According to junior high geography textbooks, the 2 stars in the Big Dipper's spoon always point to the North Star. And the direction of the North Star is true north. Moreover, the Baltic Sea, as an inland sea, is not particularly wide. Even sailing against the wind, a longship would surely reach the other side within 2 days. Compared to the ocean itself, what truly terrified Loki was Duke Bernard's well-equipped private army. Having a brown-haired, dark-eyed missionary in his ranks was unbelievably strange, and Duke Bernard was a meticulous man. If old Valder caught his attention, explaining himself would be a hassle. If the old man fell into the Duke's hands and gave away the Han Dynasty book covered in maps, losing the maps would mean a complete loss. If they could pry old Valder's lips and learn the westward route, treasures would be within their grasp. Just as dusk fell, the hunters from Hanshu village duly set out. Nearly 500 kilograms of corn, quinoa, potatoes, and sweet potatoes. Over 50 pieces of dried bacon and salted fish, a dozen bags of liquor, over 20 pounds of pig iron, about 5 pounds of copper, less than a pound of loose silver, 2 black goats, 7 or 8 old hens, 3 geese, 6 women of childbearing age, and 8 children under 10. This was all the hunters from Hanshu village had reaped from this autumn's raids. He peeked at the ancient tome in his arms, then looked at the old priest, Valder Loki, who lay comfortably on the top of his longboat, held in his arms like a beast. Superstitions were all futile superstition, only knowledge was his true faith. Nearly 20 years had passed. He had finally gained his first knowledge of this alien continent. This was the true reward of the sea raid. After landing and returning his boat, Loki drove his carriage over the rugged mountain roads for nearly 10 days. After a bumpy ride, he finally reached Hanshu village, the village that had raised him. It was a small village nestled between a mountain and the sea. Beneath the towering snow-capped mountains, shrouded in mist, dozens of households surrounded a massive wooden castle. The castle was modest, covering approximately 1,000 square meters, with 3 floors above ground and 2 underground, boasting approximately 50 rooms in total. This was Loki's home and the only legacy left to him by his deceased father. Although constructed entirely of wood, the material was chosen from the sturdy and durable iron pine, found at the foot of the snow-capped mountains. In winter, the sturdy, half-meter-thick wooden walls can withstand temperatures as low as -50 degrees Celsius. Even in the event of an invasion, the village walls can withstand the onslaught of ordinary siege engines. Since adulthood, Loki had utilized the remaining knowledge in his mind to implement various improvements to Hanshu village. First, he directed his tribesmen to wield hoes and dig up the frozen soil, transforming the previously above-ground wooden houses into pyramid-shaped structures called gatans, half above and half below ground. While the average Viking was 1.89 meters tall, the doors of the cahons were only 1.2 meters high. This offered 2 advantages. 1. It minimized the heat dissipation area through the doors and excess building walls, further increasing indoor temperatures in winter. 2. 1.2 meters is the height that small domestic animals like pigs and sheep, which can't withstand the cold, can enter the house. Humanoids can only crawl inside. While this may be inconvenient for ordinary exits, this design is extremely effective when defending the village from external enemies. When the villagers of Hanshu village defend their homes, regardless of whether the intruder creeps in head first or legs first, even a frail woman holding a large axe at the door is enough to hold her own. The fastest way to break through the Kahun is to throw a torch in from outside, but no Viking would do that. 90% of wars in Scandinavia are fought over the plunder of resources. A house incinerated by fire destroys everything, leaving nothing behind, not steel, gold, silver, or food. The Kahun is nearly invincible against bandits. Over the past 2 years, Duke Bernard's fiefdoms have raged in numerous wars, but the number of invaders traveling long distances to plunder Hanshu village has decreased. The extreme poverty and immense hardship of this region were an open secret throughout much of Scandinavia. Furthermore, Loki built the first public bathhouse in this barren land. He burned and destroyed all the ancestral statues and tablets in the caverns beneath the castle, then dug deep underground to draw in natural hot springs from deeper below. Using this underground spring as a source, and supplemented by a water purification system made of wood ash and charcoal, he constructed a public bathhouse covering over 200 square meters on the castle's lower level. Separate baths for men and women were available 24/7. Thanks to this symbol of civilization, Hanshu village experienced extremely low rates of illness. In an era when medicine was scarce and treatment relied solely on bloodletting, a single bout of the flu could wipe out half the village's young laborers. The bathhouse ensured that residents could regularly cleanse themselves of bacteria, not to mention that bathing also helped to relieve the fatigue of days of hunting. The village also employed various other time-saving measures. For example, the castle's chef would collect flour from the entire village, then light a fire and make bread for the entire village. This eliminated the time-consuming process of going from house to house to heat their own stoves and let the dough rise. Women could have more time to fish, raise chickens, and grow wheat, while men could focus on hunting. This eliminated the daily need for wood cutting. Furthermore, his innovative long-tillage planting method for sowing the few acres of thin land outside the village doubled the yield compared to the traditional direct seeding method. The time traveler's numerous ideas had the villagers of Hanshu village giving him a thumbs up, praising his father for having given him the right name. Loki, he truly was as wise as the god in Valhalla. Yet, even so, Hanshu village still had only 42 households and a population of just over 170. The reason was simple: poverty. Chapter 4 Illuminati, please vote for recommendation. In the valley, there are 4 vassal cities. Blood Pigeon Town, with its vast salt pans, is the wealthiest. Fogduck Town, nestled in the mountains, thrives on the land, its main industry being logging. Leaping Horse Hill, nestled beside a river in the grasslands, is a must-go for nomads from neighboring provinces. And Hanshu village's main industry is pickling and catching herring. Unless starving, no one enjoys eating this foul, sour, fermented fish. Not to mention, in summer, the pungent smell of herring permeates the entire village. One of Loki's first actions upon assuming power was to abandon his ancestral heritage. No one living in Hanshu village is allowed to pickle herring. In those days, without those bizarre food shows, many Vikings would rather gnaw on tree bark than eat pickled herring. So, what's the point of doing this? Hanshu village's remote location, weak military strength, and lack of a mainstay industry all contributed to its poverty. But for the Vikings, the deepest root of poverty was their lack of ships. Pirates without ships aren't pirates, they're just street urchins. Within the river valley ruled by Duke Bernard, only Storm's End, the Duke's hometown, has a shipyard. Shipbuilding is a secret shared by all Viking dukes. Each of the 6 provinces ruled by the Viking kings possesses its own unique techniques. For an ordinary person, this might seem like a world of difference. But as a time traveler, Loki spent much of his time online in his previous life. He'd watched DIY artists recreate the treasure ships used by Zheng He on his voyages, and he'd watched the Hollywood blockbuster Pirates of the Caribbean no fewer than 10 times. In the mountains, where the sun and moon are invisible, Loki had been tinkering in his village since the age of 12, figuring out how to build ocean-going vessels. Viking lords generally sailed eastward because the narrow Baltic Sea was narrow in diameter. But to reach the English Isles westward, they needed to cross the North Sea. This westward journey was almost 3 times longer than the eastward journey, and that's just in straight lines. In the medieval era, Before GPS and steam engines, sea travel was never simply a matter of measuring straight-line distances. Any storm could cause a lightweight wooden vessel to veer significantly off course. While historically, the Vikings had indeed used canoe-like long ships to cross the North Sea, Loki had no idea of the real cost of achieving this feat. His village consisted of only a few 170 people. He couldn't afford any risks. His memories of ships were merely fragments from movies and television, and he hadn't been a professional carpenter in his previous life. Therefore, using his limited knowledge to truly construct a manned wooden ship capable of ocean voyages was a long and arduous task. To build ships, he joined Duke Bernard's pirate group every year, touching every detail of Viking longships with his own hands, meticulously studying their functions and principles. When his father was alive, he could only build models using his own looted money. However, 2 years ago, with his father's death, Loki finally let loose. The statues of his ancestors enshrined in the basement appeared to be made of brass. The day after I died, he immediately brought out all the ancestral statues. Worshipping the dead when the living can't even get enough to eat, I knew my father well, but these old guys, who had nothing to do with me, were taking up so much of the castle's public space. Melt it all down. Make it into nails. Why build a protective fence on the mountainside of the village? How could an enemy climb over 1,000 meters high and attack our shabby village from the air? Tear down all the wooden fences on the mountainside. I'm going to build ships. So, after spending all his money and selling everything he had, Loki finally built 2 double-decker, 3-masted wooden ships that could accommodate 50 people after 8 years of experimentation. Part of the design was modeled after the interior of Captain Jack Sparrow's Black Pearl from the movie. Other parts were inspired by Zhang He's treasure ship, a replica of Zhang He's treasure ship by a craftsman on the coin station. These 2 types of sailing ships, which appeared in the age of exploration in the late 18th century, were already over 1,000 years ahead of their time in this world, appearing in ancient Viking territory in the 7th century AD. The first thing he did upon returning home was to check on his wooden boat in a large cave on the coast. Hey, boss. This voyage went off the charts. Seeing Loki's return, a skinny Viking, Sanji, who was smearing animal blood on the wooden figurehead, immediately approached him. He was the village carpenter. The other day, while the Duke was out at sea and the coast was deserted, I took a few of the guys who stayed behind in town for a stroll. Haha, your new bow blade design is quite impressive. It slices through the waves like a branding iron through butter. Haha, I told you. Installing a stupid ram on the bow is a design inherited from the ancient Greeks. They used rams to wage naval battles, using the massive bulk of their ships to smash through the enemy. You're just being ridiculous. Viking longships float like leaves. Who are you going to ram? What good are you going to do with it, other than smash yourself to pieces? In the Middle Ages, craftsmen generally passed down their skills through word of mouth. I will pass on my knowledge to my descendants just as my master taught me. Few people bother to ask why, and if asked, their master's response is usually some nonsense like divine guidance. During the Dark Ages, technological progress was extremely slow for thousands of years. Loki believed this was largely due to the heavy-handed interference of religious charlatans. And in this life, his first priority was to change that. Boss, we've exchanged all the silver we loaded last time for skeins, ropes, and canvas. We've got a full ship's sails. Now we just need an anchor. Sailing won't be a problem, but without an anchor, our ship will be blown away by the strong winds if we stay ashore. With an anchor, we can set sail immediately. A heavy silver bag slammed down in front of the shipbuilder, Sanji. He picked up the bag and weighed it. The loose silver inside should barely be enough to buy an anchor. The Slavs are incredibly poor this year. After paying tribute to the Duke, we only have this little silver left. Tomorrow, go to Storm's End and have a good chat with your father. If it's not enough, buy the anchor first. We'll definitely pay him back on our return. There are only 2 months left before winter. Take your 2 sons and go buy the anchor. Be discreet and don't let too many people know. I'll take this time to quickly interrogate my new friend. Let's try to set out in a week and make a big splash. Returning to the village from the cave, all the looted food was neatly stacked at the feet of the steward, Wentzov. Wentzov was a silver-haired scribe in his 40s. He wasn't a native Viking, but a Slavic orphan captured by Loki's father during one of his raids eastward. He grew up in Frostwater village and knew every household there. It's too little. Too little, he muttered as he looked through the animal skin bags on the ground one by one. I've calculated that these things, plus the meat we saved from hunting, can almost get us through this winter if we eat sparingly. Besides, I'm planning to do something else in the near future. I promise that no one will starve to death this winter." Hearing this, Wenzhov just shook his head. Haha, no one will starve to death? Ever since he could remember, there has never been a winter in their poor village where no one has starved to death. I brought back 6 women and a dozen children this time. They are still assigned to your command. They are all Slavic fellows and it is easier to get along with them. Again, women can live with the men they like, but if they don't like them, don't force them. Children should still live with their mothers. If you want to be independent of men, you must have the ability to raise children by yourself. Wenzhov knew how to do his job, so Loki didn't continue to give him instructions. He quickly came to the slave barracks, pulled out old Valder, who had been carefully protected all the way, and ordered the servants in the camp to take him to take a good bath, eat a full meal, and finally change into clean clothes and sit in front of him. "My brother, after a full meal and a hot bath, do you feel much better from the inside out?" Old Valder looked around with his alert big eyes, and finally nodded hesitantly. Loki was different from all the pirates he had met. He gave old Valder the feeling of a cunning and venomous snake, slippery and elusive. "From now on, you are my best friend, Loki. I need to ask you a few questions. First, you must answer me honestly," Loki said as he walked to old Valder. He grabbed his loose collar with both hands, and pulled down his robe on his chest with force, revealing a triangular symbol tattooed on his left chest. "What the hell is going on with that Illuminati symbol on your chest?" Hearing the word Illuminati uttered by a crude Viking barbarian, old Valder was stunned, momentarily forgetting to cover up the Illuminati emblem on his chest, the all-seeing eye. "What are you? Haha, it seems I was right. This thing really is the all-seeing eye. The Illuminati really is hiding in this dimension." Chapter 5, Yahweh the All-Seeing and the Eye of All-Seeing. Illuminati through the Internet. This secret society, secretly controlled by wealthy tycoons, is said to have its true origins as far back as 4000 BC in ancient Egypt. The Illuminati possesses immense influence, and despite the many shifts in human civilization over the past 6,000 years, they have never vanished. In Loki's previous life, they committed 2 outrageous acts, publicly announcing their existence. First, they printed the Illuminati's emblem, the all-seeing eye, on the back of the Lighthouse Nation's $1 bill. Second, they executed the god of film, Stanislaus Kubrick. Throughout human civilization, ordinary individuals who achieve the highest level of achievement in any field, especially in the media, which can have a profound impact on others, are often invited to join the Illuminati. Rumor has it that Kubrick was a member of the Illuminati, but he was an outlier. In his final film, Eyes Wide Shut, he fully depicted his experiences with the Illuminati. This led to strong interference from his production company, Hohenheim Pictures. The studio demanded that he remove 24 minutes of footage related to the Illuminati, but Kubrick ruthlessly refused. Consequently, the Illuminati executed this unrivaled film genius to conceal the 24 minutes of footage. Eyes Wide Shut became the final film by the cinematic god Kubrick. These 2 events were merely a brief glimpse of the Illuminati's prominence before the world. Their untraceable achievements were far more numerous than those made public. The Crusades, the French Revolution, World War I, the assassination of Kennedy, the Asian financial crisis, all these seminal historical events were driven by members of the Illuminati. Their existence was known worldwide, yet their exact location was virtually unknown. The all-seeing eye resembles an eye nested within a pyramid. However, after careful deconstruction, it was discovered that the symbol was actually derived from the hexagram representing the evil god Satan. The Illuminati's worship of Satan was a nearly universal secret. This cast doubt on the old priest's Christian identity. Considering their first encounter, in near 0-degree temperatures, he wore a robe soaked in blood, yet bore no wounds. Loki instinctively knew this seemingly ordinary priest must be hiding something more. Ever since hearing the word Illuminati, Old Ward had expressed a deep fear of Loki. In the prosperous civilizations of England, France, and Bavaria, the Illuminati was a deeply buried secret. Yet, this uncaring Viking barbarian recognized it at a glance. This sent chills down his spine. Seeing this, Loki quickly poured him a cup of hot water from the nearby copper kettle and slowly handed it to him. "Brother Valder, I'm not your enemy. Look at my face. I'm not a member of the Inquisition, nor am I a follower of the Holy Lord on your cross in any way. We're just a bunch of ordinary pirates. You've seen my village. 2 words describe it: poor and shabby. 3 words: poor, shabby, and weak. I don't mind your hatred for the Holy Lord. If you want, I'd even be happy to wield my axe and help you raise a few monasteries. Loki graciously sat down beside old Valder and placed a hand on his shoulder. Have you ever considered, perhaps Mr. Satan of your Illuminati saw you, alone and helpless in the cold wasteland, and felt so pitiful that he sent us, a bunch of poor Vikings, to your side. We are the help Brother Damn sent for you. Loki bared his teeth, forcing a kind smile. In a few days, I'll feed you well and take you home. When we get ashore, please point out a few wealthy churches. You don't need to lead us in person, just point us in the right direction. We'll go in and rob, and we can help you kill a bunch of Holy Lord believers. I'm happy, you're happy, and Brother Satan is happy too. Haha, to sum it up in 4 words, isn't that wonderful? Loki blasphemed the gods without hesitation. After 2 lifetimes, he had never believed in the reality of these so-called gods. The word blasphemy was no pressure on him. Old Valder's eyes rolled around, and it was clear that his mind was wavering. My book, haha, Loki laughed dryly. Do you have any money? Old Valder shook his head. I sold you as a slave. Can your old bones mine or farm? Old Valder shook his head again. Loki spread his hands. Look, all you have is this tattered book. I have to keep it even if I don't want it. Otherwise, as a pirate, I'd be embarrassed if word got out. Followers of Odin found a holy bishop in the wild, fed him, and sent him home. They're completely servile, not asking for a cent. These words sent a chill down Loki's spine, and he quickly withdrew his hand from old Valder's shoulder. The one nailed to your shabby cross isn't the savior. I am your savior. Oh, right, my name is Loki. Of course, you can call me Generous Lord Loki if you want. You must be tired from all the traveling. Have a couple of ales to calm your nerves during your stay in Frostwater Castle. If you need anything, food, clothing, even a bed warmer, feel free. Just tell me. Goodbye. Having fulfilled all the formalities, Loki backed out of the room, gently closing the door behind him, and immediately discarding the fake smile. Damn it. I haven't practiced in over 20 years. Being forced to speak a few words in English is really tiring. With a gentle snap of his fingers, a lean, armored warrior emerged from the castle's shadows. His eyes blazed, his hands never leaving the hilt of his sword at his waist. His name was Sartre, and he had grown up with Loki. He was the security chief of Hanshu village. Brother Sartre, you and 3 of my brothers will stand guard outside this guest room at all hours. See to this old man's every need. Check the room through the observation hole every hour. Keep an eye on him, boss, no problem. I searched him thoroughly before escorting him back to the city. This old man doesn't have a muscle in his body. He's not a warrior. This guy still has a lot of secrets. He's unwilling to talk right now, and I'm embarrassed to press him. If we push him too hard and this old bastard keeps giving us blind directions, we're all doomed. Sartre nodded cautiously, then stood across the guest room door with his sword in hand. Patting his trusted subordinate firmly on the shoulder, Loki left the castle's guest quarters. Taking a deep breath of air, he ascended the creaking wooden stairs, heading for the castle's rooftop. The wooden castle left behind by his father had 1 basement and 3 floors above ground. The higher the floors, the narrower and colder they became. In the cold, high attic, lived someone Loki didn't want to see, yet was obliged to. He was a storm monk stationed in Frostwater Village, Valhalla, and the village's only chosen one. His name was Ahe the Seer. Ahe practiced a most mysterious path of Valhalla, the Raven Path. Legend has it that 2 ravens perched on Odin's shoulders, one capable of seeing into the past, while the other could pierce the mists of time and see into the future, events yet to come. Beyonders who practiced the Raven Path were mostly historians or diviners, but the origins of this old man, Ahe, who lived in Frostwater Village, were quite mysterious. No one knew his exact age. Even the oldest villagers claimed that this chosen one had been present in the village since they were children. As a chosen one, he had cultivated the Raven Path and had reached sequence 5, universal. This was the dividing line between high and low sequences, and a crucial criterion for judging talent's rarity. The only person in Hanshu village who had never respected Ahe was the time traveler Loki. In his eyes, this old man couldn't farm, couldn't fight, and couldn't impregnate a woman. Besides spending his days in the attic reading yellowed scrolls and studying useless bone powder, he offered no assistance to the village's daily operations. If you were just a useless piece of scrap, it would be fine. But for every crucial activity, such as farming, hunting, or looting, this man would emerge from the attic, leaning on a worn bone staff, and, pretentiously, toss a ball of powder into the fire to divine. If he said anything unlucky, the hunters in the village would immediately go on strike. Even knowing that people would starve to death due to insufficient food, they refused to hunt. In Loki's eyes, the old charlatan's presence was a serious obstacle to the daily production and development of the Hanshu village production and construction corps. When his father was still alive, though he'd hated him to the core, he couldn't do anything about this piece of old bacon. After his father's death, he immediately wanted to eliminate this fellow, but strange things happened one after another. The attic where Ahe lived was actually dilapidated. Loki's first attempt at charlatan murder plan was to deliberately saw off the 3 wooden pillars supporting the attic and replace them with 3 stones under the pillars. In the dead of night, he simply pulled out the square stones from under the pillars, and the attic would collapse. He could use the excuse that the old charlatan fell to his death, saying, the attic was old and in disrepair. In the impoverished and backward medieval times, even an elderly person getting up in the middle of the night to urinate could die in the latrine, and no one would care. However, that night, after the attic collapsed, he was surprised to discover the old charlatan was not there. He had gotten up to use the restroom that night and had fallen asleep squatting there. Thus, he perfectly avoided Loki's murderous intent. When one plan failed, he devised another. Noticing the old charlatan's habit of getting up to use the restroom almost every night, Loki chose a particular day, deliberately extinguished 2 candles by the staircase, and lurked at the bottom. As the old charlatan dazedly opened the door and descended, Loki deliberately removed 2 wooden planks from the dark stairwell. In the darkness, a single fall would have killed the old man. However, that night, a voice from above him cried, "Ah! I can't hold it anymore. I really can't hold it anymore." The subsequent events were so tragic that Loki's mind had chosen to forget them. After these 2 incidents, even with his unwavering atheism, Loki developed a certain respect for the power of the chosen ones in this world. The next day, after bringing a few strips of bacon and a thick bearskin, he never set foot in the old sorcerer's room again. Over the next 2 years, the old sorcerer proved quite effective. Every time Loki led a production operation, he would perform a formal ritual and then give the go-ahead. He never caused any trouble. In Loki's opinion, while the 2 murder attempts had yielded no results, they had at least served to intimidate the enemy, a considerable accomplishment. In a few days, Loki would lead his men westward aboard his new ship. This would be a significant event in Hanshu village, and even in the history of the Vikings. Loki felt it necessary to give the old sorcerer a warning, to let him pretend so he wouldn't cause trouble when the real thing came. However, just as he approached the old sorcerer's door, a gust of cold wind blew, and the heavy wooden door suddenly opened. It was late at night, and the room was pitch black. Ahe, the knower, stood less than 2 meters away, holding a dim oil lamp. "Skeptic, I've been waiting for you for a long time, please give me a recommendation vote." Chapter 6 The Oracle of Ahe. Knower, truly possess any true power? Honestly, Loki himself wasn't sure. Most of the time, this old man, with his black robes, black lips, and complexion as dark as a raven, was unreliable. As a child, he'd once wandered into Ahe's attic, where he was burning an unknown powder to calculate a wedding date for a hunter. The old charlatan first grabbed a handful of the powder and threw it into the brazier. Thick, multicolored smoke billowed, shrouding the room in a haze. Perhaps for this very reason, he chose to reside in the top attic of Frostwater Castle. Visibility suddenly dropped, and young Loki accidentally bumped into a nearby wooden shelf containing ancient scrolls, causing several to fall. An old man, his face painted with grease, hurried over to count the scrolls on the floor. Turning back, he shouted to the tribesmen, enveloped in the smoke and fire, "Odin has decreed that your wedding will take place on the 5th of next month." Loki looked down and saw 5 bundles of animal skin scrolls had fallen from the shelf. From that day on, he firmly believed the old charlatan was an unlearned charlatan. When one examines another through a magnifying glass, they inevitably discover flaws. For example, during the annual autumn hunting festival, the village's storm priests, according to Viking custom, performed a barbarian dance and recited the Nibelungenlied, adhering to the ancient precept that mortals must not gaze directly upon the gods. All the tribesmen knelt and bowed their heads in obedience. Except for Loki. He observed with wide eyes that the old charlatan's dance varied from year to year. Sometimes, when he drunk less and was more clear-headed, he'd dance an extra verse. If he drunk too much that year, the drunken old shaman would jump around aimlessly, then cut 2/3 of the 4-part Nibelungenlied. The lyrics remained the same every year. When drunk, he'd often throw in an impromptu freestyle. Loki even suspected the Hanshu villagers had never heard the complete Nibelungenlied. His only normal time was perhaps on certain cloudless nights, when he'd sit on the towering stone hill outside the village, holding up a simple lens made of polished quartz and crystal, and gaze at the stars all night long. No one knew what he was looking at. No one knew how he'd climbed that nearly 90-degree rocky outcrop. Pushing open the door, Loki entered the Viking shaman Ahe's chamber. It was late at night. The only light illuminating the darkness was the candle held by Ahe the seer. The firelight shone on his matte skin and black lips, making him appear like a ghost in the shadows, flickering between light and darkness. "Welcome home, doubter," this was the name Ahe had given Loki, and Loki saw nothing wrong with it. Placing the candlestick on the square table, Ahe turned and opened the wooden window behind him. Outside, a dozen large crows cawing like morning. He grabbed a handful of dry corn and threw it out, then put his ear to a crow's beak. "My raven tells me your trip went smoothly, haha. The loot has been lying in the center of the courtyard all afternoon, visible through the window. Do you even need your crow to tell you?" Gently putting down the bacon and food in his hands, Loki sat down across from Ahe. "Old man, there's no future in following Duke Bernard to rob those poor Slavs. I've built a ship myself, and in a few days I plan to gather men and sail west to the Isles of England to make a killing. I've come here to say hello. When the divination comes, I'll just jump around a bit, just for show. Don't ruin my plans then." Loki spoke directly, not intending to hide anything. "If we can find a new route this time, our village will be free from poverty forever. And with the money, I can ensure you have fresh meat and eggs, ale, and milk every day." Putting down his gift and speaking, Loki stood up and began to leave. He hadn't intended to consult with Ahe when he entered the tower, merely to deliver an order. But as soon as he finished speaking, the old shaman across from him suddenly reached out and grabbed his forehead. In the darkness, his bony arm lashed out like a venomous snake, and Loki had no time to dodge. His fingers were cold, but his palm was warm. Grasping Loki's forehead, Ahe gently closed his eyes. In the forest, a mule can live for 9 years, while a wolf's lifespan is only 3, that's true. Young city lord, you understand it all. Hidden dangers are everywhere, and you will be targeted by a ferocious hunter. And all I see is you falling into an endless, deep darkness. That darkness is cold and deep. At the bottom of it, I even see the fallen gods." Loki chuckled dryly, interrupting his mumbling. "Falling into darkness, every year, someone falls into darkness. Falling into water is falling into darkness, getting married to an evil woman is falling into darkness, and so is catching a cold or fever. These 4 words are a panacea for the old charlatan, and he can use them on anyone he encounters. Alright, let's fall into darkness. Better than huddling in this remote village and starving to death together." Gently pushing aside Ahe's withered arm, Loki stood up and tried to leave. Before leaving, he reminded him once more. "Remember, don't tell me any lies about a failed start. With the money I make this time, I'll buy 2 cows for the village and give you 2 bowls of hot milk every day. I guarantee you'll enjoy a happy and peaceful old age." The empty attic was filled with bookshelves and ancient scrolls. Loki stood up and left. He walked along the rotting and moldy bookshelves to the door. Just as his large hand touched the doorknob, a cold hand suddenly grabbed his wrist again. He turned and saw it was Ahe. The old sorcerer had silently followed him to the door. Loki struggled gently, but his withered hand was like a steel shackle, unable to budge. "Doubt." Ahe looked directly at Loki, his eyes turned pure white, and his voice was as hoarse as a saw blade cutting steel. "Don't trust outsiders blindly. And never underestimate the authority of the Lord. Going to sea without permission is a serious crime, and every Viking lord is a servant of the gods in Valhalla in the mortal world. Each of them possesses unique powers bestowed by the gods. In the previous life, they served the gods, and in this life they came to the world to help the gods and rule over all living things. From the moment you were born, your biological mother was swallowed by darkness. I can't see your life star, nor can I see the place of your soul in Valhalla. The old lord took you to Storm's End 3 times, and you never got the armband of Lord Bernard. It is precisely because he never trusted you." Loki nodded without comment. As a time traveler, he was actually full of contempt for these barbarians who had not taken a bath for 3 months. So what if he was a lord? He just lived in a bigger house and had more soldiers under him. In the final analysis, he was just a bandit leader who smelled sour. He was so stupid that he kept fooling his subordinates that he was a god. In the end, he even believed it himself. Let Loki believe in the authority of such a person, haha. He really didn't know what else to say except haha. Ahe widened his empty eyes, his palms were like steel shackles, and he had no intention of letting go. Perhaps, you are destined to chase the darkness. Whispering softly, Ahe grabbed a pitch-black crow from the dark void behind him. The old city lord saved my life. For this journey, I'll lend you a raven. Ravens are Odin's messengers in the mortal world. When you're desperate, chase a raven, and perhaps the gods will grant you a glimmer of hope. With that, he sighed desolately and gently snuffed out the candle in his hand. The candle flame went out, and the room was instantly enveloped in darkness. Loki had no escape, and could only watch helplessly as the darkness swallowed him. The next moment, when he opened his eyes again, he was surprised to find himself in his bedroom, on a warm bed. A fire burned warmly in the fireplace, and a maid in a long linen dress stood quietly by the door. This was indeed his room. If it weren't for the call of a large raven standing by the window, Loki would have thought everything he had just experienced was just a dream. Chapter 7 Tempering Marish. Carpenter Songi clutched his purse tightly as he steered his carriage closer to the towering walls of Storm's End. Unlike the wooden Coldwater fort, the towering Storm's End was constructed entirely of azure natural rock, with green vines snaking through it, like a turquoise mountain rising suddenly from the plain. As a craftsman, Songi couldn't help but feel the power of his creator every time he approached this massive fortress. According to legends told by the Storm monks in Valhalla, this castle was built in ancient times by the Frost Giants, commanded by Ymir, the first Titan, to dig out massive sea-stabilizing stones from the frozen seabed. Each of the stones surrounding the castle was more than a man's height, having stood firm for centuries, having weathered countless battles. Songi wasn't sure whether the ancient legend was true, but the stone castle, with a battlefield area of nearly 10 hectares, was one of the oldest structures in Scandinavia, a fact universally acknowledged by Vikings. Sanji will never forget the shock he felt when he first arrived at Storm's End with the old village chief. That year, at just 12, he followed the chief into the imposing hall and swore allegiance to Bernard, Lord of the Vale. He remained silent throughout the journey, even the old chief avoiding the small groups of chosen ones. Only Loki, the chief's 5-year-old son, remained calm and composed, showing no fear. One day, this castle will be mine. With these words, the old chief quickly covered his mouth, and Sanji nearly peed himself out of fear. Treason is a serious crime in every dynasty, and even a child's innocent joke can be a disaster if it reaches the ears of those with ulterior motives. Over a decade later, Sanji increasingly feels that Loki is the reincarnation of the god from Valhalla. His mind is filled with knowledge beyond his time, and his ambitions extend far beyond the impoverished village of Coldwater. A motley old horse pulled a carriage closer to the castle's vast moat. Loaded beside Sanji himself and his 2 sons, were the daily necessities he'd crafted in his spare time using his carpentry skills. Master Loki's designs for the folding bench and wheelbarrow were always hot items at the market at Storm's End. Of course, Sanji's sons also crafted several wooden round shields, the kind commonly used in Viking warfare, and wooden swords for training children in combat. Hey, isn't that brother Sanji from Coldwater Village? Feeling up today? Coming to the market to sell your wares. As they approached the city gates, the gatekeeper gaped, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. This old man was a household name among the merchants of the valley, a notoriously difficult character. Haha, Sanji chuckled. My lord, you have led the lords back from their successful eastern expedition. Your pockets are overflowing with wealth, and I must take advantage of your prosperity, otherwise, over the next few nights, you lords will be lingering on the soft bellies of gypsy women, leaving your wallets empty. Who can I sell my little wood goods to? Ha ha ha! Amid the laughter of the gate guards, Sanji took out a few silver coins from his pocket and a few cigarettes made by Master Loki from tobacco and papyrus, stuffing them into his furry hands. These are new tobaccos this year, and they smell great. When I sell the goods and make the profit, I'll treat you all to drink. Sanji was quite clear-headed. Nobles swore allegiance to the Lord in order to receive a share of his lands. In Viking culture, sailing without the Lord's knowledge was a serious crime, but this troublemaker Loki clearly had no intention of reporting this to Duke Bernard. This meant not only having to stealthily purchase the anchor under the noses of the city guards, but also finding a way to transport it back to Frostwater Village without alerting them. This required appeasing these greedy guards first. Driving across the drawbridge over the moat, one officially entered the inner city of Storm's End. Storm's End was the largest settlement within 1,000 miles of the valley, with over 1,200 households and nearly 5,000 residents living inside and outside the castle. And this was the smallest of the 6 duchies in Scandinavia. The neighboring province, Dragon's Breath Plateau, ruled by Duke Mocklash, had a population of 8,000 in its main city, Dragon's Breath Caverns. The largest city, Conqueror's Fortress, home to the current Viking king, Sabertooth Ashalavan, was said to have a military force of 10,000 shield axe warriors alone. While not a large city by comparison, Storm's End was still the busiest marketplace within hundreds of miles. After entering the market, they set up their stall at a random spot. Sanji's cart, displaying cutting-edge wooden artifacts beyond its time, immediately attracted the attention of the strolling Viking warriors. Hey, young and old, if you're passing by, don't forget to check out my crafts. A few days ago, I dreamed of Loki, the god of wisdom. He personally granted me 3 life-changing artifacts. As they spoke, Sanji's sons unloaded one folding chair after another from the cart. Lifting the chairs high, they spun them around, gently shifting their legs. The crossed chairs shifted, transforming into stable, supportive seats. Hey, isn't this thing amazing? Not only does it save space when traveling, but when 3 or 5 friends come over, they can all be wooden chairs when they're folded up. We don't need so many chairs on a regular basis, and we can fold all those adorable treasures and hide them away, and if we get drunk, we can just fold the chairs and wheel them up for a friendly fight. It won't kill people like an axe, so you won't regret it forever after sobering up and discovering you accidentally killed your own brother. How practical. The crowd quickly gathered around, and Sanji's eyes rolled nimbly. He asked his youngest son behind him to unload a wheelbarrow and other small gadgets from the carriage. His eldest son sensibly took over Sanji's class and began demonstrating. While everyone's attention was riveted at the market stall, Sanji drove the empty carriage into the alley behind the shopping street. Hooded, he quickly surveyed the shops around him, finally parking at the back door of one called Quenched Marish. Seeing no one around, Sanji scurried inside with a deft, unhurried sprint. He opened the door to the blacksmith shop, and was met with a wall of blazing, dry heat. Several bare-chested Vikings were wielding hammers, tempering swords, axes, and horseshoes. They showed no surprise at Sanji's entrance. This was because Sanji's full name was Sanji Marish. The shop's owner, Gore Marish, was his biological father. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8: A Secret Talk Between Father and Son. Dear old father, I want. PFFT. He was barely speaking when a sturdy old man with white hair and a beard beside the blazing stove swung his fist and smashed it into Sanji's stomach. Haha. My dear son, you finally remembered me, your lonely and miserable father. After beating Sanji to pulp with one punch, old Gore showed no sign of stopping. His fist spun back and forth across Sanji's stomach, leaving him powerless like a fragile child. You bastard, as a Viking, why are you learning carpentry instead of blacksmithing from me? Carpentry is fine, but you're working in that shabby place called Hanshu Village. I'm really ashamed. Sanji was old Gore's eldest son, and he had once placed high hopes on him. But Sanji's subsequent series of psychedelic actions left him completely confused as to what he was up to. Your father was a well-known figure in Storm's End. Not only did the Duke always bring me gifts when he returned from raiding, but every time he passed by Quenching Marish, he always brought me a few bags of tobacco. But you're getting more and more cunning. It's bad enough that you ended up in that desolate village, but you're being treated like a hard laborer by that barely there village chief. Your father was a well-known figure in the river valley, so where can I put my dignity? Your mother, who died of illness many years ago, would have pity on you if she had seen you in such a state. Would she have opened her coffin and come knocking on your head? Dad, I can't do it anymore. Please spare me. Sanji, a carpenter, couldn't compare to his father, who worked all day long. His father was only 13 years older than him, because the old bastard had married at the age of 12. His mother's family was the court chef of the Viking king Sabertooth of Shalavan, and they were quite wealthy. All the initial land and construction costs for the quenched marriage shop were provided by Sanji's mother and her family. Although his father's cooking skills were mediocre, the shop's large size and luxurious decorations intimidated Duke Bernard and most of his subordinates. The Marish family was also one of the most prominent families in Storm's End. Half an hour later, Sanji, nearly foaming at the mouth from the torture of Old Man Gore's iron fists, was bathed and dressed by his maid. His father, heartbroken for his son's lack of proper food in the remote coastal village, slaughtered a sheep and began skewering the meat with tongs. Meanwhile, Sanji's two sons, having sold all their goods from their cart, returned to see their grandfather. "Hey, look what this is," Old Gore said mysteriously, pulling a silver jar from the iron safe in his bedroom. "Last year, I went to Conqueror's Fortress for the Midsummer Festival. In the town market, I actually saw merchants from the eastern lands of the Tang dynasty. Oh, look at them. Riding flying swords, their clothes fluttering. Many of the country bumpkins present even knelt down for them, thinking they were gods. Your father participated in a forging competition, didn't win any prizes, so he had no money. Forget about the wares the Tang merchants have. Those country bumpkins in Conqueror's Fortress haven't even heard of them. That porcelain, crystal clear, snow white, luminous like the moon in the sky. And that smoky gauze, a piece of gauze threaded through the square hole of a Tang copper coin, silky smooth as grease." Old Gore's eyes gleamed with childlike fascination as he spoke of the Tang wares. Across from him, Sanji shook his head helplessly. His father had a restless heart, over 40 years old, yet still as innocent as a child. He mysteriously opened the silver jar, revealing a multicolored powder made of chili peppers, cumin, and sesame seeds. The room was instantly filled with a strange fragrance. "Your grandmother, out of old friendship, gave me a jar of spices custom made for the O'Sullivan family. This is a blend of spices made by merchants from the Great Tang Dynasty. It's said they traveled across several continents, from the eastern continent all the way west, collecting 7 or 8 different plant species, then refined them using the unique Tang Dynasty roasting method. Sprinkling this on meat, oh my, that's the flavor. Today, I'll give you, the younger generation, a taste." Old Gore reached into the jar, plucked out 2 handfuls of spices, and evenly spread them on the tender, freshly slaughtered lamb. "Sanji, you're my eldest son, listen to me, people strive for heights, water flows to the bottom. It's better to be the tail of a phoenix than the head of a chicken. That's the lesson your father learned a lifetime. If I, Gore Marish, could visit the Great Tang Dynasty in the East before I die, it would truly be a life well spent." Sanji coughed twice, hastily interrupting his father. His father was a successful businessman, but not a truly accomplished craftsman. Even as a child, Sanji could see that his passion lay not in blacksmithing but in poetry and distant lands. Riding on a longboat, braving the wind and waves, drinking wine he'd never tasted before, eating dishes he'd never tasted before, seeing sights no one else had seen, and making friends of all kinds. This was Old Man Gore's true lifelong pursuit. Meanwhile, Sanji had no interest in wandering the world. He simply wanted to stay in his workshop, diligently felling trees and crafting boats to create the finest wooden boats in Scandinavia. Before his death, he would pass on his skills to his son, who would continue to build even better boats. Boat building was his passion and his sole purpose in life. "Dad, I'm here to buy an anchor." "An anchor?" Old Man Gore lowered his eyelids. "What do you want an anchor for, kid?" Could it be? The air in the room froze, and Old Gore's skewers of meat froze in his hands. The fire crackled in the fireplace beside them. The father and son stared at each other for a full 10 seconds before he opened his mouth and gently leaned his head towards Sanji's ear. A kid from Hanshu village found a ship. In the Middle Ages, shipbuilding was considered the most advanced form of woodworking. A simple ship required the coordinated efforts of numerous disciplines, including carpentry, blacksmithing, textiles, and forging. Old Gore had never imagined his son, who had only ever made wooden shields and carriages, could build a ship. In his opinion, the only way Hanshu village could have found a ship was if a broken anchor cable had been found on the shore, blown into the sea by a strong wind. While such an occurrence was rare, it did occur several times a year. Sanji's face was frozen, and he didn't dare tell his father that he had built the 2 massive 3-masted sailing ships himself. "That's right. I didn't expect your new village chief, who hasn't even grown all his hair yet, to be so lucky. How big is the ship?" "Very big. Oh my god. Did you pick up a tank ship? Oh my god. Is it deep? Is it badly damaged? Are there any dead people on board? A ghost ship with people dead is unlucky. We need to ask the storm monk to perform a proper ritual. Sangji couldn't answer any of these questions. The man before him was, after all, his biological father, and admitting that he could build a ship was too shocking. If he told his father the truth, that all his knowledge came from Master Loki, who had just turned 20, not only would Old Man Gore believe it, but he himself would be hard-pressed to believe it. Haha. Not bad, Old Man Gore laughed heartily. In Scandinavia, nothing is more joyful than finding an empty ship on the coast. He reached out his big hand and patted Sangji's shoulder, and he couldn't help but speed up his stringing. Have you reported to Lord Bernard? Give me the figurehead later, and I'll coat you with a layer of gold powder. It's so shiny that you can tell it's the work of Old Man Gore. Dad, that's the problem. I haven't reported to Lord Bernard yet. Then what the hell are you still standing there for? Hurry up. Do you want to go out to sea privately? If the Lord finds out about this, he'll break your legs. Old Man Gore never thought that Loki's idea was to go out to sea privately. Sanji coughed again, feeling rather helpless, and hurriedly explained, Ahem, this is just a found ship, tattered and tattered. We're not sure if it's usable. What if we report to the Lord, boast about the figurehead, and get it back, only to find it leaking when we get home? How embarrassing. Why don't you sell me the anchor first, and I'll go back and see if the ship can sail. Winter's coming in a few months anyway, and we won't be able to sail until the ice thaws in spring. Sanji's eyes averted, and he lowered his head. Old Gore held his gaze for 2 seconds, his face expressionless. He knew his eldest son well. He was a man devoted to technology, and he wouldn't lie. But then again, Gore had lived for over 40 years. That was considered old age for a Viking. How could he not know what Loki, the half-haired man from Coldwater Village, was thinking? Which lord hasn't considered going on a private piracy expedition? Who wouldn't want to pocket all the gold and silver they've earned with their lives, and one day replace the Duke who looms over them? After much deliberation, he finally nodded solemnly. Okay. I'll have my apprentice carry the carriage down to the basement. I'd rather go myself. There's a lot of people around, and it's better to keep a low profile on things like this. Sanji wiped his hands with a rag and stood to leave. Wait, Gore growled. The air between them froze again, but the next moment, Gore suddenly shouted at the top of his lungs, Boys, it's time to get off work. I'm letting you go early today. Pack your things and go home. A flurry of footsteps echoed outside, and within a few minutes, silence returned. Old Man Gore carried a half-empty basin of mutton skewers to the front door to light a fire. Before leaving, he removed the key from his waistband and gently tossed it onto the table. That was the key to the basement of the blacksmith shop, where the anchor that Sanji had been longing for was kept. Chapter 9, The Sunken City. Loki frowned as he carefully flipped through the old book before him. This is fucking awful. He'd repeated these 2 sentences, 5 words each, no less than 100 times. For 2 days, he stayed indoors, meticulously studying the ancient Chinese book in Old Ward's hands with the same intensity as he'd prepare for the college entrance exam. The book's cover was made of an unknown black animal hide. 6 characters in traditional regular script were branded in the center with an iron, a general map of the world. Below them were 2 small characters, Volume 15. Though unfamiliar with the Tang Dynasty's regular script and traditional Chinese characters, Loki could still recognize them. Upon opening the illustrated, color book and carefully studying each character, he immediately noticed something unusual about it. Volume 15 marked on the cover indicated it was only one of a set. However, as soon as he read the first sentence, Loki discovered a major problem. The entire book described a city that didn't exist on land. The sunken City of Hohenheim was its name. The book contained 7 maps, piecing together a complete picture of the sunken city. The first map accurately depicts transportation routes within the town and its urban divisions. The second uses contour lines to record the geography, and the next charts the course of mountains, rivers, and roads leading to the city. And so on. The maps are remarkably familiar. Because the brushes used by the ancients were difficult to control, each map captures only a fraction of the details. Beyond the maps, there are dozens of colorful illustrations, rendered in gold, silver, cinnabar, and multicolored stone powders. Each illustration accurately depicts the ethnic groups, hierarchies, beliefs, and daily life of the sunken city, even down to details like what people ate, how many hours they worked, and what occupations residents of different areas performed. The problem is, this city doesn't exist on land. The very first page gives a crucial clue. The author of this book, Mo Yiquan, a Tang dynasty scholar, did not create it. When Emperor Xuanzong of Tang, Li Longji, commissioned him to compile the general map of the world, Sunken City volume, he hand-copied it from an even older Qin dynasty bamboo scroll in the palace, the map of the tributes of the barbarians of the world. In other words, this is a city that existed over 1,000 years ago during the Qin dynasty. According to historical records, the first emperor unified the 6 kingdoms, bringing the nation to its peak of power. Seeking immortality, he dispatched millions of cultivators to the far corners of the world. On the one hand, they spread the glory of the king to the barbarians. On the other, they slew the ancient gods lurking in the shadows of the 9 provinces, extracting the precious treasures to refine elixirs. Slaying the gods, refining the elixir of immortality. The sunken city of Hohenheim was discovered by these wandering pre-Qin practitioners. Using the mystical power of the stars, they located this city dedicated to the ancient gods, slaughtered their followers, and shattered their bodies in an attempt to refine them into elixirs. However, this city existed beneath the sea, reappearing only once every 7 years. If the Qin practitioners failed to return to the surface within that day, the sea would reappear, trapping them beneath the surface for 7 years. The Qin practitioners possessed a unique method for refining the ancient gods. According to the book, the ancient gods were powerful beings floating in outer space, accidentally crash-landing on the 9 provinces. Their essence, qi, and blood were incredibly abundant, and refining them into elixirs required at least 49 days. For some of the larger old ones, it took 81 days. The key cultivators who had chopped the ancient gods into pieces began a dispute within the sunken city. Some argued that 1 pill or 1 less didn't matter. The great king's palace was overflowing with precious materials and treasures, and they couldn't afford just 1. They didn't need to be trapped underwater for 7 years just for a single pill. Instead, they could use that time to follow the astrological dictates and reach the hiding places of other ancient gods. This would be more efficient. However, some of King Qin's fervent supporters believe the great king's orders were paramount. The great king has spoken of slaying the gods of the world, they said. Our mission as cultivators is to eliminate and refine every ancient god hiding in the corners. Not a single one should be left behind. In their eyes, the lifespan of a key cultivator lasted a century. King Qin's unification of the empire was a monumental achievement, unparalleled in history. 7 years of hard work for such a great man was nothing. The book's story abruptly ended here. Did these key cultivators ultimately remain in the underwater city? Did they successfully refine the elixir? How did their subsequent missions progress? It was as if the author had suddenly died mid-book, leaving no record. Hey, brother, if you're reincarnated as an online novel writer in your next life, your first orders will be ridiculous. This interruption left Loki with a nagging feeling. Turning to the next page, he saw the annotations of the Tang dynasty copyist, Mo Yiquan. Because your majesty places such high importance on the overall map of the world, he demands prudence and meticulousness. I have tried many methods to find the entrance to the sleeping city. However, carrying numerous ancient texts from the pre-Qin period, I have sailed the lesser cold sea for over 20 years, yet I have never discovered a secret passage to the submerged city. Your majesty gave me a 30-year deadline to return. Just when I was about to fall into despair, Patriarch Hongjin finally bestowed great blessings upon me. Patriarch Hongjin, as unofficial history suggests, was the master of Laozi, the founder of Taoism. On the full moon of the frost-eating moon, the 4 stars Xianshu, Xiangxun, Xianji, and Xianguan appear above the sea. Every 7 years, the distance between the 4 stars decreases by 3 points per day. On that day, the great eating sea is calm, and a thick fog descends. At this moment, take the blood of the old god's followers and sprinkle it into the sea. The moon and stars will create tidal vortexes, mapping the path to the sunken city of Hohenheim. Reading this, Loki shook his head so hard he nearly broke his neck. Before this time travel, a book filled with so many illustrations of fantasy creatures and bizarre creations, coupled with such a ridiculous wayfinding method, would have looked like some fanzine churned out by die-hard fantasy fans. Think the 100 Greatest Secrets of Harry Potter or A Song of Ice and Fire, the complete set, they were all just that. There's a certain group of people who naturally enjoy reading about settings. No storytelling involved, Just give them a fictional world and a bunch of imagined creatures that exist within it, and they'll be enthralled, happily engaging in their own discussions on online forums and online forums. It seems the ancients had already played the same trick for over 1,000 years. With a deep sigh, Loki silently closed the ancient book before him. Tasteless to eat, a pity to discard. That was his sole feeling about this fantasy novel setting collection. As a highly educated atheist, he didn't believe a single word of it. In his eyes, it was just a collection of sophisticated tales, a science fiction novel from over 1,000 years ago. It offered no practical help to the Hanshu village production and construction corps under his command. He gently closed the ancient book and called for the maid outside to bring a basin of hot water. He washed his face carefully, patting it hard to regain consciousness. Glancing at the slowly rising moon, he grabbed the axe standing in the corner and stood by the basin, cleaning the blade and carefully polishing it. It was a 4-foot-7-inch Viking axe. The bronze blade, set in a dark, glossy pine wood, shone a faint red in the light. The blood of hundreds of dead souls soaked through the wood, leaving the mark. It was the only relic left to Loki by his father after his death. "My son, I can see that you are no ordinary person. As your father, I don't have much to teach you, but you must remember, martial arts are the foundation of a Viking's existence. Whether you are a farmer chopping wood or a farmer raising chickens in the mountain village, everyone must learn how to wield an axe. Otherwise this cold and desolate mountain will immediately devour you without leaving a single bone. I am about to enter Valhalla and drink wine with the gods. This axe has been with me all the way. I hope you will continue to use it to find your place in Valhalla." After saying this, the old man, with only half of his body left, closed his eyes and died. No one knew how he managed to return from the land of the Slavs for more than 10 days with such a broken body. But from that day on, Loki never stopped training in martial arts. After sharpening the axe, he walked to the center of the courtyard with his bare upper body, carrying the heavy axe. After chopping for a long time, he looked up inadvertently and saw that fine snowflakes had begun to float in the sky. The snowflakes fell on his skin, which was red from exercise, and immediately evaporated into white mist. Unconsciously, he found that he had become accustomed to the feeling of swinging the giant axe. Perhaps, he had already accepted his identity as a Viking pirate in this life. Chapter 10 Preparing to go to sea. The next morning, Sanji and his 2 sons returned with the anchor. 3 hours later, in a secluded cave by the sea, he had already attached the anchor to one of the 2 3-masted ships. At that moment, Loki felt a faint pang of tears welling up in his eyes. After 20 years of tireless effort since his time travel, he finally had his own ship. This was even more satisfying than paying off his mortgage in his previous life. From that moment on, he could finally call himself a Viking, not a farmer, hunter, or mercenary for the Lord. He was accompanied by 11 hunters from Hanshu village. These weren't the most skilled hunters in the village, but they were Loki's most loyal childhood friends. They had grown up with Loki, forging a deep bond over 20 years. Whether hunting giant bears and wolves in the woodlands or crossing eastward into the Slavic territories, he could trust these reliable friends with his back. That's why they were so astonished when they saw this behemoth, several times larger than an ordinary longship. "Boss, is this our ship, by Odin? Are you truly the reincarnation of a god? You could build something so magnificent." The Vikings' meager vocabulary was devoid of any words to describe the massive 3-masted vessel before them. Their jaws dropped when they discovered, upon entering the cabin, that it could accommodate 50 people on 2 decks. By the early 8th century, Viking longships represented the most advanced shipbuilding technology in all of Europe. However, longships were ultimately the same design as Indian canoes. They had only seen these massive, tower-like vessels, with upper and lower decks, on merchants from the Eastern Tang dynasty. It was a cutting-edge craft they dared not even imagine. "That's basically the situation," Loki said straight to the point. "Today we'll just have a brief meeting. Time is running out. I need to find a route to the Western Isles before the ocean freezes over in winter. I've thought of loading up every hunter in the village and sending them westward with their families, young and old, to gamble on the nation's fate. But honestly, that's not realistic. There are so many accidents that can happen at sea. Any mistake in the smallest detail could ruin everyone. If that happens, the village will be left with only widows and children. I can't imagine how they'll survive the winter." Loki's words drew nods from his companions. A calm leader is always more reliable than a hot-headed rogue. Loki is the kind of village chief who brings peace of mind. "So, here's my plan. To operate this ship, We'll need at least 10 men, working in shifts day and night. This time, I'll only take 11 of you, and we'll prepare 20 days' worth of rations. We'll only sail for 10 days. If we haven't found land to the west after 10 days, we'll return to the village, we'll spend the winter storing food, and then we'll pick up more food and continue westward next spring. That way, even if Lord Bernard spots us, we can just say we were just sailing around and didn't report to the authorities. We can get away with it. Loki never had any intention of serving under Lord Bernard for long. If he reported to the Lord, he'd probably confiscate his painstakingly built ship. Even if he didn't, Loki always planted a group of monitors on every voyage. They were there to feed the hungry, doing nothing else. And upon his return, the Duke would take 70% of his loot. It was through this method that the 5 dukes under the Viking king maintained their firm grip on this land for centuries. They plundered their vassals' personal property in a near-plundering manner, perpetuating their poverty. The nobles simply couldn't afford an army capable of resisting them. Even with ships, Loki wasn't naive enough to believe his current men were strong enough to challenge the Lord. Bernard commanded over 1,000 Viking shield axemen, while the entire village of Hanshu only had about 40 capable of fighting. With a 24:1 strength ratio, engaging the Duke head-on was barely a solution. It was like trying to extinguish the sun with a bottle of mineral water. It was completely unrealistic. If they wanted to go to sea, the time would always come. Duke Bernard sailed his fleet eastward across the Baltic Sea nearly every autumn, raiding and plundering Slavic towns. He could easily exploit this unguarded opportunity to quietly launch his voyage. With just a few round trips, he'd have the money to build an army. After practicing martial arts last night, he lay in bed, thinking for a long time. Throughout European history, Western Europe has been a symbol of civilization since the ancient Greek era. The Anglo-Saxons at that time were undoubtedly more civilized than the Vikings. If these 11 men were lucky enough to reach the English Isles to the west, looting would be out of the question. The fact that these 11 men could stay ashore and guard the ship would be a great accomplishment. According to the timeline, the Red Kingdom should still be in the Tang dynasty. All the island nations near the Mediterranean thrived on maritime trade. If there were bustling markets on the English Isles, they would undoubtedly feature Tang-style shops, symbolizing the pinnacle of human civilization at that time. The Eurasian Silk Road trade belt, which dates back to the Western Han Dynasty, 202 BC, boasts a history of nearly 1,000 years. Although he was nearly penniless, he still possessed a copy of the general map of the world's geomantic omens. This exquisitely crafted fantasy novel setting collection, while incomprehensible, was a beautifully hand-drawn book. Finding a wealthy Tang dynasty figure would easily fetch a fortune. He needed to sell this book to buy a much-needed item, a compass. At that time, the Tang were the only people in the world who possessed the technology to create a compass. The magnetic needle was invented during the Kaiyan period of the Tang dynasty, 713–741 AD. If he could acquire a compass, combined with the world map he memorized, he would become the Columbus of his time, never again lost at sea. Chapter 11, Mist. 10 attendants worked overnight to load the boat with food, water, and ravens for finding land. Loki, taking advantage of the twilight, snatched the drowsy old priest, Father Ward, from his bed and rushed to the seaside cave. Over the past 2 days, he had repeatedly asked the old man what kind of ship they had taken and how they had sailed to Slavic land. Old Ward's eyes rolled around, always evading the question. He reminded Loki of the slippery, cunning men he had encountered at work in his previous life. The more respect you give, the more you become crooked. Father Ward was no fool. He saw immediately that Loki had no intention of killing him. So, he brazenly took up residence in Hanshu village, eating a hearty meal every day, gaining considerable weight in just 3 days. Loki had a way to deal with such a man. You won't tell me, will you? Fine. I'll capture you and bring you aboard together. Why did the ancient saying get on a pirate ship? Because once aboard, regardless of whether they were human or animal, if the ship capsized, everyone would perish together. Truly sailing out into the desolate sea, the old man had to lead the way even if he didn't want to. His own life depended on it. He led the old man down to the lower deck. With 10 men manning a 3-masted ship, everyone had to play their part. Father Ward, with his age and limbs, couldn't do much else, but he managed to stay in the lower cabin, cleaning, scrubbing toilets, and so on. At 4 a.m., Loki and his 10 companions steered the massive 3-masted ship out of the estuary near Hanshu village, through the thick darkness. It was late autumn, and the sky was filled with fine, sugar-like snowflakes. The 3 sails of the 3-masted ship were fully loaded, and the ship was approaching 30 kilometers per hour. While still considerably slower than the treasure ships of Zheng He's voyages, this speed was quite impressive for Loki, a first-time shipbuilder. Old Ward stood at the bow, stunned. Unlike the young men manning the sails, his age and experience far surpassed his peers in this era. He had seen many magnificent artifacts and creations throughout his life, but he had never even seen or heard of a ship like the 3-masted ship Loki was currently manning. Its size aside, its speed alone surpassed any other vessel of its time. Under the silvery moonlight, the 3-masted ship's bow cut through the vast ice that had already formed on the sea surface. Before sunrise, the vast vessel had vanished into the vast expanse of Scandinavia's coastline. A chill wind blew, and Loki, clad in a thick bearskin coat, stood behind the helm. He calculated the position of the stars and the rising sun, steering the bow strictly due west. According to his calculations, if the map in this life was the same as in the previous one, with favorable winds and currents, this ship could cross the North Sea and reach the English Isles on the other side in just 30 hours. However, due to the lack of maps and the Vikings' backward and primitive culture, outsiders dared not approach their lands. Information about the outside world available to Hanshu village was extremely limited. It was for this reason that Loki had brought enough food for 20 days. He had prepared for the possibility that the world map in this dimension was completely different from his previous life, or that England, west of Scandinavia, was thousands of miles away. Our goal is to find the western continent. Everyone, keep your eyes open. Lookouts on the masts, be alert. Use your quartz lenses to carefully observe the western sea for me. We are looking for thick fog. Wherever we see thick fog, England is not far away. Loki had been on a business trip to the British Isles in his previous life. During his week-long trip, London was covered in fog for 6 days. Considering Dickens's famous novel, Oliver Twist, Loki, though not a geologist, had plenty of evidence around him that the British Isles were likely a foggy land. The 3-masted ship cut through the waves. Loki was lucky. He encountered favorable weather on his first voyage with the Hanshu villagers. All day, the ship maintained a speed of nearly 30 kilometers per hour. Near dusk, as the sun set and the sky and earth were shrouded in a deep blue twilight, the observer atop the mast spotted a thick fog on the sea not far away. Loki was overwhelmed with excitement. According to his experience in his previous life, the appearance of thick fog should indicate that land was just ahead. Haha, they had found the British Isles in a single day. The wisdom of the time travelers was truly beyond the imagination of the natives of this plain. With high spirits, they raised their flags and shouted signals. Without looking back, the 3-masted ship accelerated and plunged into the vast white fog. However, Loki could never have imagined that after entering the thick fog, they would not emerge again for a full 10 days. Fog forms when the ground dissipates heat, gradually cooling the air near the ground. The relatively humid air quickly cools to the dew point, forming countless small water droplets suspended in the air. This was Loki's scientific understanding of fog from his previous life. The 2 most crucial words in this passage are ground. Thick fog must be formed by land, because only land can store heat. A vast, landless sea simply couldn't create such a natural spectacle. So, upon seeing the thick fog swirling over the sea, Loki rushed in without hesitation. He naively believed that if he could rely on inertia for another 2 hours, the ship would inevitably hit land. However, after a full day, the sea remained tranquil, shrouded in thick fog. Loki was an atheist. His only unwavering faith was in science. However, what was happening before him clearly defied scientific explanation. First, it was late autumn, and the Ruhekau estuary near Hanshu village was already covered in floating ice when they first set sail. Yet, the waters here were surprisingly warm. Puffs of mist rose from the surface, warming everyone on board like a sauna. Second, after a full day without escaping the thick fog, a faint sense of crisis began to emerge. Loki acted decisively and ordered the nets to be cast. However, the fish caught in the nets were species he had never seen before. Seahorses as long as a meter, sea turtles 2 meters in diameter, and schools of phosphorescent mollusks that appeared at night. All of these creatures fiercely challenged his remaining common sense as a time traveler. As a Viking sea dweller, Loki was also somewhat of a fisherman, but he had never seen these bizarre creatures in the waters near Hanshu village. While everyone stared at these terrifying and bizarre creatures, only the preacher, old Valder, crossed his arms and curled his lips in a hidden smile. Seeing something was amiss, Loki acted decisively in order to return. The thick fog had completely silenced the sea breeze that had blown since setting sail. The three-masted ship's sheer size was now becoming apparent. The 10 men aboard rowed with oars, a far greater effort than rowing a small, nimble Viking longboat. A day passed, and everyone was still mired in the thick fog. 3 days passed, and even 10 days later, the nearly endless fog that enveloped the sky and earth refused to dissipate. As a chief countryman, Loki was acutely aware of the dangers. The ship was carrying enough food and water for 10 men for 20 days. While they could rely on fishing for food, the problem of fresh water proved impossible to solve at sea. A thick, salty fog hung in the air, and after days of rowing, everyone's water consumption was increasing. The remaining fresh water wouldn't last a few more days. This fog, connecting heaven and earth, was severely punishing Loki's innate sense of superiority as a time traveler. After 10 days, he ordered his men to stop rowing and rest for a day. He realized that without the sun and stars, he couldn't see the direction. Blindly rowing not only wasted energy, but also caused the ship to go in circles. Loki returned to the captain's cabin, ate a hearty meal, and fell asleep. When crisis strikes, anger, frustration, and collapse are useless emotions. The only thing that could save him from this desperate situation was to maintain a clear mind and sufficient physical strength. Before long, snoring could be heard throughout the entire ship. Chapter 12 The True Face of Old Valder. Loki was awakened by the prick of a bird's beak in his face. When he opened his eyes again, dusk had fallen again. A massive raven, nearly 50 centimeters long, was stabbing Loki's forehead with its pitch-black, horny beak. It had escaped from its cage at some point and landed on Loki's pillow, made of wheat husks. If Loki remembered correctly, this was the raven Ahe the seer had given him before his departure. Loki had brought it aboard not because he believed his when there's no way to go, follow the raven rhetoric, but because he could release the ravens when in nearing land. If they didn't return, it meant land was just around the corner. He had released this massive black bird several times in the thick fog, and each time it returned unharmed. He stood up, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Loki donned his leather armor. He realized that after a full day's sleep, his three-masted ship was now shrouded in thick fog. Visibility inside the cabin was a mere 2 meters. Loki had barely taken 2 steps, his axe in hand, when the enormous raven behind him flapped its wings and flew to the hatch in front of him. It pecked the wooden door frame twice with its pitch-black beak. "Are you asking me to open the door?" Doubtfully, Loki raised his axe and opened the hatch. Beyond the hatch lay the side of the wooden ship. It was late afternoon, dusk had deepened, and the thick fog between the sky and the earth had turned a rich, deep blue, shrouding the entire ship in a profound azure glow. Visibility outside the cabin was even lower. The gloomy dusk, combined with the thick fog, meant Loki could only see less than 2 meters in front of him. The raven continued to guide him until he reached the bow of the three-masted ship. Suddenly, he felt thick blood beneath his feet. The enormous raven, gifted to him by Ahe the seer, continued to flutter a short distance ahead of him. Loki drew his great axe and gripped it tightly. Slowly moving forward, he finally saw a tall, gaunt figure at the center of the bow. He raised his hands, chanting an ancient prayer Loki couldn't understand. At his feet, a massive hexagram, drawn in blood, lay. Its 6 corners were intricately stenciled with fish, insects, birds, snakes, and other intricate patterns. This figure was none other than the slippery Father Ward. Old Ward raised his hands, chanting an unknown scripture, his entire body aglow with a rich, blood-red glow. The crimson light was so dazzling that it seemed like a beacon of light in the deep blue twilight. At his feet lay the corpse of a Viking, wielding a great axe. Clearly, all the blood needed for this sinister sacrifice came from this fallen compatriot. Loki's eyes instantly turned red. Everyone on this ship was his childhood playmate. They were the core fighting force of Hanshu village, sworn to his death. He couldn't bear the death of even one of them. Without hesitation, he drew his great axe and roared, slashing at old Valder's emaciated back. But at that moment, the chanting ceased. Father Valder, draped in a blood-red robe, spread his hands. As if obeying his command, the boundless fog retreated to the sides. The vast sea and starry sky reappeared, and above the starry sky, a bright moon reigned supreme. 4 giant pearl-like stars, circling the moon, shone brightly in the sky. Wait! I wonder where I've seen this image before. Where did it come from? That's right, It was the fantasy novel he'd snatched from old Valder. Loki had spent 2 days poring over it, so fluent he could practically recite the entire book. He clearly remembered a line from the book: Frost moon, on a full moon, 4 stars, Chyanshu, Chyanksun, Chyanji, and Chyanquin, appear above the sea. Every 7 years, these 4 stars would grow as large as pearls in the sky. The little cold sea that day was bound to be calm, with a thick fog descending. Old Valder, his hands pushing aside the thick fog, remained motionless, but at that moment, his head strangely rotated 180 degrees, turning to look at Loki behind him. Haha. I really have to thank you. Without you, I would never have found this ocean in my entire life. You're right about one thing. You truly are the savior sent to me by the Lord in my time of need. Ha ha ha. Old Valder let out a piercing laugh, like a saw blade tearing through steel. The next moment, something even more terrifying occurred. He took the dead Viking's great axe, facing the blade, and gently slashed it across his chest. Dark red blood flowed from his body, slowly dripping onto the deck and then into the sea. Fresh flesh and blood, a sacrifice to the bloody creator. The sea, once as calm as a tranquil lake, suddenly swirled without wind, forming a massive vortex. The vortex also drove the 3-masted ship into a spin. The immense centrifugal force prevented Loki from swinging his axe, forcing him to cling to the side of the ship. His mind once again recalled the words in the overall atlas of the world: when 4 stars ascend, take the blood of the old god's followers and sprinkle it into the sea. The moon and stars will create a tidal vortex, revealing a passage to the sunken city of Hohenheim. Yes, that's what the ancient book says. He hadn't expected this to be fantasy. It was all actually true. Ha ha ha. My master, your loyal servant is here to greet you. Blood flowed profusely, and Father Ward, already emaciated, became a skeleton. His expression twisted and perverse as he fell into the sea, lifted by the water and sinking alongside Loki's 3-masted ship into the boundless darkness. Fuck you, Loki knew there was a 99% chance he'd perish. Yet, in his final moments, he struggled to hold on to the side of the boat with one hand, while with the other he drew a gleaming dagger from his back. Even if I die, I'll drag you, a charlatan, down with me to avenge my fallen Viking brother. His eyes opened with a grim expression, and he spotted Father Valder's position. But just as he was about to let go and rush towards old Valder, a sudden, soft splashing sound reached his ears. The raven, which had been flapping its wings to lead the way, suddenly plunged into the sea. The raven glided beside Loki, and Loki had no time to ponder the question of why can ravens swim. The words of Ahe, the knower of all, echoed in his mind like thunder. Ravens are Odin's messengers on earth. When there's no way out, chase them, and perhaps the gods will grant you a glimmer of hope. Should he chase the raven, or kill old Valder, the man who had harmed him, with a desperate stab? In the final, life or death moment, Loki took a deep breath and followed the raven into the swirling seabed. As long as there was a 1 in 10,000 chance of survival, he had to save his own life. The reason was simple: in this life, he wasn't alone. Hanshu village still had over 160 people to feed. He was the village chief. He couldn't die. Chapter 13, The Sunken City, 1. It's impossible to breathe underwater. The longest documented breath-holding time is 22 minutes. The story of the 3 Ruan brothers, as recorded in the water margin, who could hold their breath underwater for 3 days, simply didn't happen. Loki felt he was about to die. The vast, dark ocean was thousands of meters deep. The mere drop from the surface to the bottom was enough to kill him. However, he hadn't anticipated that soon after hitting the water, the surface behind him would suddenly form 2 walls of water, one on each side, like 2 gates. In the center of the walls, the remaining water formed a slope, like a water slide at a water park. The 3-masted ship, recently caught in the whirlpool, had a double-deck design, retaining a large amount of air in the middle layer. This allowed the ship to remain afloat even after being briefly caught in the whirlpool, even when the water suddenly parted. After struggling to reach the rudder, Loki's strong hands had just grasped the steering wheel when he saw Raven again, who had just dove into the water. It fluttered its wet wings vigorously. Right beside the Raven, old Valder, shrouded in a crimson glow, spread his arms and hovered in the air. His figure resembled the Holy Lord Christ, the universal deliverer of all life, except for the crimson glow that now evoked a cold and sinister quality. The 3-masted ship glided down a slope of water, plunging headfirst into the cold seabed. Loki looked back and saw the slope was like a steep slide. Even if he tried to row back to the surface, he would have been powerless. Even more bizarre were the walls of water on either side. An unknown force parted the water, and as Loki and Old Valder descended, swarms of sea creatures appeared behind the walls of water, gathering to watch. The shallow surface contained only the unknown fish Loki had caught. However, as he descended, more and more enormous sea beasts, the likes of which he had never seen before, began to appear. Giant octopuses measuring tens of meters in length, humpback whales the size of underwater towers, and even larger deep-sea anglerfish. They floated neatly behind the wall of water, watching Old Valder and Loki descend into the darkness of the seabed. Damn it. Since we're here, we'll just make the best of it. This car on my head is only the size of a bowl. Now that things have come to this, what else can I ask for? He still had the overall atlas of the world tucked into his arms. He had originally planned to take it to the market to sell it, but as the book's promises came true, his intuition told him that his best hope for a comeback might still lie in this ancient tome. Brothers, don't be afraid, at least we are not dead yet. Every era has its own pioneers. Even if I fail this time, if I can escape by luck, I will not give up looking for the way to the west. This is the only way for the first to go and the forerunners in every era. It is also the fate that mankind must bear if it wants to progress. Loki had experience working in a listed company in his previous life, so he said this kind of polite words a lot. However, surprisingly, his brothers did not seem to panic about what was happening before their eyes. Boss, don't be afraid. Isn't it good that you're not dead? Yes, I often hear my father say that in ancient times, during the Age of Heroes, many Viking pirates unearthed treasures buried by their ancestors on the seabed or deserted islands. Who knows? Maybe on this voyage, the god King Odin will admire our bravery and grant us a stroke of good fortune. That's right. My father always said that the gods are always watching us. It's said that the current Viking king, Saber-Tooth O'Sullivan, hunted a dragon hidden in the underworld alone as a child, and was directly granted the power of Stormcaller, sequence 5 of the Thor's Path. Just looking at this raven flying forward, I feel that something extraordinary must be waiting ahead. The brothers Loki had summoned were all young men in their 20s. At this age, they were fearless. They used wooden basins to scoop away the seawater that had seeped into the cabin, laughing and encouraging each other. Everyone was focused on the task at hand. No one complained. Half an hour later, after his men's tireless efforts, they finally cleared the boat of water. Loki pulled a fine iron javelin from the cabin behind him. With a cold expression on his face, he aimed it at Old Valder, soaring a short distance ahead. He hesitated for a moment, wondering whether to take down Old Valder with his back turned. After a long pause, he finally calmed the throbbing muscles of his right arm. He didn't know if the miracle before him was actually Old Valder's. If he died, the sea would close again, and his fragile wooden boat would be easily crushed by the water like a walnut in a nutcracker. Just then, he noticed a soft white light rising from the pitch-black seabed. Several tiny, shimmering pearls gradually connected into a chain. What was this? Loki's eyes widened, while Old Valder, in mid-air, chuckled softly. Looking back, his eyes were filled with fanaticism. By this point, Loki had fully grasped the old man's intentions. He was a follower of the evil god of the Illuminati. He had stumbled upon this ancient book compiled by the Tang dynasty scholar Mo Yiquan. Unknown when and how, he had been bewitched by the evil spirits described in it, wandering the Baltic Sea endlessly, searching for a way to enter the sunken city. He had, unknowingly, actually helped this old man immensely. As the boat slid further and further down the sea slide, the faint light above gradually faded, and deep darkness slowly enveloped him like thick ink. The only sound still emanating from his surroundings was the raven, which continued to fly overhead, its cause unceasingly. The raven continued to flap its wings vigorously, hurtling towards the dark seabed. Loki's eyes widened as he saw a series of connected points of light in the endless darkness ahead. As the light spread, he suddenly saw a vast city hidden beneath the sea, shrouded by a thin membrane, like the projection room in an aquarium. As the boat drew closer, Loki, standing at the bow, could already make out many of its details. A sunken city. Strange algae, unlike those found on the surface, grew in the soft sands of the seafloor. Massive stone buildings stood amidst these strange plants, and in the center of the city stood a massive statue. The statue was crimson, the same color as the blood-soaked old ward. As the ship drew closer to the city, more details emerged before Joyu's eyes. He discovered that the faint glow was from a type of jellyfish that slowly drifted through the city, and that fluorescent algae were growing wildly on the city's surface. This underwater city resembled those apocalyptic documentaries he had seen in his previous life, now covered in a wild, overgrown algae. There was not a single living soul in the entire city. Chapter 14, The Sunken City, 2. With a resounding crash, Loki turned around and saw the three-masted ship he'd spent over a decade building crash into the water with a thud, shattering into pieces. He'd never imagined that the way to enter this underwater city was to open a hole in the outer wall of the city's bubble, allowing seawater to pour in like a waterfall. This vertical waterfall of seawater reached a height of nearly 100 meters. Had Loki and his companions not jumped overboard at the right moment, they would have been crushed to death by the free-falling ship. Pawing hard and swimming to shore, Loki counted the men. The good thing was that no one was injured in the free fall. The bad thing was that not only was the three-masted ship completely destroyed, and old Valder, who had been floating in the sky, disappeared, but the hole in the huge dome had also completely closed. Everyone was completely trapped in this underwater city. Damn it, trusting science? Trusting shit. Climbing out of the pool of water, Loki struggled to sit up and pulled out the fantasy novel setting collection from his arms. At this point in his bizarre journey westward, everything he saw was just as described in the book. It was all real. Adhering to the principle of seeking truth from facts, he had to believe, no matter how reluctant he was, that this plane was completely different from the history he'd learned in his 9 years of compulsory education. Damn it. They say history's written by the victors, so you're just fooling me. Loki only had 5 seconds to express his frustration and anger. He forced himself to regain consciousness immediately. Behind him stood 10-20-year-old tribesmen. Their lives were just beginning. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, he would do everything he could to bring them back alive. Garrison Captain Sartre was directing his men to salvage the remaining food from the sunken ship in the lake. The lake in the sunken city was fresh water, so the remaining creatures and fresh water would be enough to sustain them for a few more days. Loki found a large vertical patch of green algae and leaned against it, opening the overall map of the world in his arms. According to the book, this place is called Fallen Lake, the outermost perimeter of the submerged city of Hohenheim. Around Fallen Lake, there should be a road paved with science labs. This road leads to the city's outer reaches, the Hall of the Blood Sacrifice Acolytes. Brothers, gather your things and gear. We'll all be entering the city in 10 minutes. Loki took this opportunity to flip through the book. When he came to the page with a giant illustration painted in crimson cinnabar, he didn't dare to ignore it. The blood-stained stone reef is unique to the sunken city. It's speculated that it's most likely a foreign plant brought by the Blood Creator when he fell from the Outlands into Kyushu. This creature is white when young. As it ages, it slowly absorbs the blood and energy of all living things around it, turning completely red after 100 years. Elder Zhuan Hezi believes this is a daily food for the Blood Creator clan, replenishing the blood and energy they need for daily resuscitation. Note, this object is flammable like wood, emitting red flames when burned, attracting large groups of indigenous people. The dark seabed was almost devoid of light. To read the words, Loki practically had to lift the book and press his face into the glowing algae on the ground before he could finish. The three-masted ship had been shattered by the fall from the sky. The wood used in its construction had been completely soaked by the lake water and could not burn. Seeing the giant red coral nearby at night, Loki hurriedly called on his men to wield their axes, chopping off several pieces. They then used their axes to strike the flint they carried, igniting it. Amidst a crimson flame, the group finally illuminated the passage ahead. They marched in single file, slowly through the desolate city. Everywhere they looked, algae grew wildly. According to the text, burning the blood-soaked reef would attract swarms of creatures, but as they walked, torches held high, the city remained deserted. It was as quiet as an ancient tomb. Occasionally, a bioluminescent jellyfish-like creature glided past above the vast dome. Like a light bulb, it illuminated its surroundings with its phosphorescent skeleton. Ancient texts describe this creature as a firefly, a hybrid of extraterrestrial life and ocean jellyfish. It floated in the air, resembling cordyceps, a cross between plant and animal life. Pre-Kinkigan practitioners observed its form and discovered that it could survive for hundreds of years in a self-contained state. The fluorescence emitted by their skeletons is visible only to humans. To all other creatures, they are permanently invisible. Several fluorescent jellyfish glided across the dome in a line. As they passed, Loki inadvertently looked up and saw a deep-sea beast as massive as a mountain dwelling above the dome. As he looked up, the dim glow of the fluorescent jellyfish revealed a single, glaring eye atop the dome. What is this? If calculated to scale, the pupil of the unknown beast alone would be as large as the three-masted ship Loki and his companions were aboard. Fortunately, these creatures seemed unable to penetrate the bubble-like membrane that enveloped the city. Even though they were extremely curious about Loki and his companions, they could only observe from the surface. Beyond the membrane, the sea surged. More and more giant creatures approached, as if observing goldfish in a fish tank. Mortals cannot gaze directly upon gods. Loki recalled this old Viking saying and felt it held some truth. Hurry! Let's hurry across this open space and get into the city as soon as possible. Standing at the end of the column, Loki held a torch high, urging his men to swiftly cross the vast plain. Don't look up. Once inside the city, the massive ruins of the buildings would obscure the flames of their crimson torches. They would also obscure the ancient behemoths beyond the dome. Too long under the gaze of these terrifying creatures would inevitably lead to causal stress and madness. They hurried along, swiftly passing through the vertically swaying coral reefs. Loki, torch held high, felt as if he had entered a museum of extraterrestrial life. Beneath the dome, humans could breathe freely, indicating that the air here was still a mixture of nitrogen and oxygen. Yet, the vertically swaying algae around them resembled water, constantly and slowly swaying. Strange, truly strange. Equally strange was their feet. As they sped along, through the gaps between the mottled, luminescent algae, Loki unexpectedly discovered that the path they were walking on was actually wide bluestone slabs. This bluestone slab was remarkably similar to the bluestone used for the outer walls of Lord Bernard's castle, Storm's End. Could the ancient legends be true? Was that castle really made of stones that the founding titan had sent his men to transport from this deep-sea city? Shaking his head vigorously, Loki forced himself to focus. After about half an hour of rapid travel, they were nearing the outskirts of the vast city. Fluorescent jellyfish illuminated the outlines of numerous abandoned buildings. These structures were enormous. Loki felt like an ant in the grass. He looked up at the massive door frames and windowsills beneath the dark dome. If humans had once lived in the city, they would have been over 5 meters tall. Everyone around him stopped and looked at each other in surprise. But then, Loki saw a figure in ancient armor standing at the city entrance. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15, Demon Sealing Blade. In his previous life, Loki had the privilege of visiting the terracotta warriors in Zytchen. However, he never imagined that in this life, he would actually see a real one in an underwater city far away in the North Sea. Signaling his men to remain where they were, Loki slowly approached. First, from about 50 meters away, he shouted in Chinese, "Brother." When he was 30 meters away, fearing the warrior wouldn't understand, he switched to brother. Still, the warrior didn't react. Holding a crimson coral torch high, he bravely approached. When he reached him, he discovered the man had been dead for years. He was able to stand still because his skeletal hands held a broadsword firmly planted in the ground. Bringing the torch closer, Loki discovered the sword was composed entirely of stone. This fully armed warrior wielded a stone sword. Opening the overall atlas of the world again, Loki quickly scanned the entire volume, but found no detailed record of key cultivators from the pre-Kin period. The book simply states that some of them remained underwater to refine the remains of the ancient god. Others sought other ancient gods to refine more elixirs for the king, so, it seems some did eventually remain, but why did they remain for 1,000 years? He pried open the skeleton's withered hands and pulled the stone sword from the ground. The stone sword, made of an unknown material, was quite heavy. In his hand, it felt as heavy as a Viking's broad-bladed axe. Inscribed on the blade side in the small seal script of the Great Qin dynasty were 4 desolate and ancient characters, "Blade of Sealing Demons." More was engraved on the back of the stone. During the prehistoric era, the sky collapsed and the earth sank. Numerous vicious outer gods streamed into the land of the 9 provinces through the cracks in the sky, bewitching the people and causing devastation. Unable to bear the humiliation of her subjects, Nu Wei led her troops to slay the demons and seal the devil. Using the outer gods' bodies as a fire, she forged 5 colored stones to mend the sky. The demon sealing blade was forged by Nuwa's Hongmeng patriarch, smelting the shards of the 5-colored divine stones and numerous other precious materials. It was named Demon Sealing Blade in order to achieve even greater heights, to slay all alien races under heaven. The handwriting was vigorous and elegant, carrying a strong sense of age. Loki struggled to decipher the unfamiliar small seal script. If the writing was true, then he now held a weapon older than the pre-kin era, perhaps even dating back to the mythical era of Nuwa mending the sky. Ever since Loki's time traveling through time, he had remained unfazed, no matter what happened, even when an enemy attacked him at his doorstep. However, now, when he truly held an ancient weapon from a legendary era, his composure vanished. In ancient times, the most ancient myths around the world shared tales of disaster. Why are ancient myths so often filled with catastrophes? Are there any connections between these disasters? Many scholars have offered their own theories. However, due to the vast distances and lack of strong supporting evidence, these myths, unearthed from fragments of ancient texts, have ultimately become unverifiable myths and myths. Now, this weighty piece of evidence is in my hands. Damn it, Lovecraft is the one who sees everything, the map of the world, the outer walls of Storm's End. The sunken city of Hohenheim I now find myself in, and this age-old stone sword in my hand, one piece of tangible evidence after another, all point to the ancient days when Earth was indeed occupied and eroded by evil beings from outer space. Could the truth behind the myth of Nuwa refining the 5-colored divine stone to repair the sky be that ancient humans destroyed the passage through which the outer gods entered Earth? Nuwa led her followers to eliminate a wave of them, and after Qin Shi Huang unified China, he dispatched pre-Qin Kigan masters to the heavens and the earth to eliminate another wave. Even now, are there still hidden ancient gods in the corners of the world? Yes, clearly there are. The Illuminati follower Old Wade, who has now disappeared somewhere, is clearly a follower of the evil ancient gods. He must also be in the sunken city. He must wield all the weapons he can to fight him. He drew his stone sword, and the terracotta army collapsed from the loss of its support. Millennia had rendered his steel armor as brittle as eggshell. Searching his body, he found only 2 items uncorrupted by time, the demon sealing blade in his hand and the nameplate he held in his bosom, Hongmeng Sword Sect, Gu Changking, is that your name? Gently piecing together the shattered skull, Loki couldn't help but marvel at the power of time. He now believed the fantasy novel in his arms to be true. It seemed that there must be other pre-Qin Kigan practitioners in this underwater city. The general geomancy map of the world described them as extremely powerful. Even from the author's perspective, the discussion only focused on whether they should slay the ancient god and then refine the elixir. It was like discussing whether to boil or braise a chicken after killing it. The thought of their potential defeat at the hands of the ancient god was completely lost. Yet, this Gu Changking had died here. Clearly, something significant had occurred during their elixir refining efforts to slay the god. Loki waved his hand, beckoning his Viking companions to come over. The deceased before them was, after all, a fellow comrade from a previous life. Unable to bear the thought of leaving his body exposed in the wilderness, he and his Viking companions grabbed axes, intending to dig a grave and bury him. However, as the axe struck the soft sand, he struck a hard, foreign object. Digging through the soil with his hands, Loki was stunned. He saw another corpse buried in the sand. This one, like the one on the ground, had weathered into a skeleton. The only difference was that it didn't wear steel armor, but instead a robe made of coarse white linen. Millennia had passed, and its flesh had rotted to ash, but this robe, which felt like cotton and linen, hadn't decayed at all. Undoubtedly, this was another ancient treasure, similar to the stone sword. Chapter 16, The Right Guardian of the Demon Sealing. After careful observation and comparison, Loki discovered an even more astonishing fact. The stone sword he had just drawn had pierced the left chest of the man buried deep underground. The stone sword cleanly severed his ribs. If he still had a heart, the stone sword would undoubtedly have pierced through it. After stripping the skeleton of its white robe, Loki discovered that the stone sword had pierced the age-old linen robe from front to back, leaving 2 small diamond-shaped holes. How could this seemingly unsharpened sword possess such power? Loki hurriedly put the white robe and stone sword away. After all, he had been a pirate for 20 years, and the principle of a thief never leaves empty-handed still needed to be adhered to. The linen robe wasn't the only item found underground. Behind him, Loki also unearthed a package made of a material similar to animal skin. The erosion of time had made the once tough hide resemble shredded newspaper. Most of the items within the package had decayed to ash, but only 3 remained. An identity badge of the same material, a bronze bamboo scroll, and a pure white jade box. Turning over the badge, Loki saw the name of the person, Lu Zhuanhezi, Right Guardian of the Demon Sealing Sect. Zhuanhezi, I've seen this name before. I remember that Moyu's complete book states that the general map of the world originated from the Qin dynasty's map of the tributes of the tribes under heaven, and the artist behind it was none other than this man named Zhuanhezi. Behind him, the Vikings gathered around Loki, holding torches high. By the light of their flames, Loki carefully unrolled the tattered bamboo scroll. While intact, the hemp ropes binding it had long since rotted. He had to open the scrolls in the order they were originally rolled, otherwise, if the inscribed bamboo leaves were misplaced, he'd be stuck piecing them together like a code for ages. Dakin calendar, 29th year of the first emperor. I used Mahist astrology to find a way into the city. The demon-conferring left guard, Feng Huzi, summoned the bloody creator, offering the first emperor the blood sacrifice seal, a secret treasure. Amidst 1,000-foot-long crimson light, the seawater split on either side, and the passage to the underwater city was opened. Loki frowned and pondered for a moment after reading the first sentence. He remembered ancient text stating that the atlas of tributes from various tribes under heaven was compiled by Zhuanhezi, allowing the scholars of the Great Qin to fully understand all the nations that paid tribute to the Qin emperor. This, combined with the first sentence on the bamboo slips, suggested that this ancient god, the bloody creator, had originally been among those paying tribute to the first emperor. He had gifted the bloody sacrifice seal, but judging by his appearance, the first emperor had only briefly spared their lives because his grand plan to unify the world was unfinished. Once he had unified the 6 kingdoms, he immediately turned his back on them and dispatched key cultivators to slay the ancient gods across the land. He also recalled how, on the 3-masted ship, old Valder had drawn a hexagram with his blood, then produced a red seal. The red seal, no bigger than a palm, floated before him. Then, with a flick of his hands, he parted the dense fog, revealing the moon behind it. Could it be that the object floating before him was the blood sacrifice seal? Old Valder possessed the overall map of the world and the secret treasure that once belonged to Lu Fenghuzi, the left guard of the demon sealer. The secrets this man holds far exceed my previous imagination. The king has ordered the extermination of all the outer gods and their followers in the city. 7 of us entered the sea, and in just half a day, no one was left alive in the city. All the outer gods were utterly annihilated, and the blood creator, due to its immense vitality, had to be temporarily cut into 8 pieces. It felt like catching an indestructible earthworm, with no alternative but to cut it open first. Were these pre-Kinkagan practitioners truly as powerful as described in the books? Having completed all the work, I discovered that the power of the blood sacrifice seal to divide the waters stems from the bloody creator itself. With the death of the outer gods, the previously separated waters will soon merge. After discussion, my team of 7 decided to have left guard Lu Fenghuzi lead 4 others to soar out of the seabed on swords and continue the outer god eradication operation. I, along with Gu Changqing of the Hongmeng sword sect and the alchemist Shenguang, will remain at the bottom of the sea, vowing to refine the bloody creator into an elixir. During the pre-Qin and early Han dynasties, bamboo slips used for recording were extremely expensive. Zhuanhezi, the recorder, tried his best to use concise language to record what was happening around him. However, as the slips grew shorter, Loki realized that the story, barely beginning, was about to end. Damn, this feels like the progress bar on a video is about to burst. The bloody creator is an outer god of immense demonic power. With the might of a Mahist alchemist, an ordinary god would be completely annihilated in 81 days. Yet, the bloody creator's mere disintegration into medicinal dregs cost us 3 years. 3 years passed, and then another 3 years, and the ancient god's massive body finally showed signs of closing. However, when the divine elixir appeared, we discovered we had all fallen into a vast conspiracy. This divine elixir is, Loki struggled to decipher the obscure Great Qin seal script. But at that moment, a sudden gust of wind blew across his face. Turning back, he saw a sharp red claw reaching out in front of him. Ha ha ha, you are truly my benefactor. First, you guided me into the sunken city, and then you found the ancient god's inner core I've been searching for so long. I no longer need you. You can die now. Old Valder emerged from the Viking wall like a ghost. All of Loki's Viking companions held their torches high. Unable to draw their heavy axes, They could only watch helplessly as old Valder's red-hot claws clawed at Loki. Loki was left with only bamboo slips. Desperate, he could only grab the hard, scattered bamboo slips to defend himself. But old Valder, having completed the blood sacrifice at the bow, was incredibly agile and powerful. His crimson hand grasped the bamboo slips. In the next second, they were like 3-day-old toast slices, crumbling beneath the crimson hand's grasp. Chapter 17, War, asking for a recommendation vote. Damn it, I haven't finished reading yet. Loki's eyes raged. Just 3 more minutes and he could finish reading the bamboo slips and learn all the stories of the pre-kin key cultivators in the city. Meanwhile, several more bamboo slips were shattered before his eyes by old Valder. A surge of fury surged from the depths of his heart. His eyes began to turn crimson, and his pale skin, like a cooked shrimp, erupted in puffs of white steam as it turned red. Loki's full name was Loki Sterrig. It was rumored that the Sterigers had the blood of madness flowing through their veins. Once they entered a state of rage, their body temperature skyrocketed, turning their entire bodies crimson. The Sterigers called this state boiling blood. If they didn't slay their enemies in this boiling blood state, they would be plunged into eternal madness. Loki, usually calm and composed, rarely lost his composure like this, but now, as he saw the bamboo slips being destroyed before his eyes, he finally lost control and let out a frantic roar. Grabbing the stone sword from the ground, he leaped upon old Valder like a cheetah, slashing down upon his head. Old Valder didn't dodge. His true target was the white jade box at Loki's feet. The ancient god's magic elixir he had sought his entire life lay within it. He had worshipped the seal of blood sacrifice and, through the secrets of the Illuminati, had gained a portion of the Crimson Creator's inheritance. If he could only obtain the magic elixir obtained by pre-kin Kigan practitioners after smelting the ancient gods, he would gain unparalleled and violent power. As the stone sword threatened to sever his head, old Valder remained fearless and continued to reach for the jade box. He had studied pre-kin Kigan practitioners for far longer than Loki had. He knew what the stone sword was. Over 1,000 years ago, during the pre-kin period, Earth was inhabited by numerous outer gods, old gods, and ancient gods. Their constant breathing and inhalation and exhalation imbued the Earth with an immense abundance of spiritual energy. With this abundant spiritual energy, Kigan practitioners could easily accumulate the supernatural powers of heaven and earth through breathing and meditation. Therefore, the number of key cultivators in the pre-kin period was enormous, with countless talented individuals. However, by now, the outer gods and the old gods had been almost completely annihilated. Without these deities dwelling on earth, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is far less abundant than it was 1,000 years ago. To wield a demon-sealing blade, a cultivator must possess abundant spiritual energy. Currently, only a few sect leaders from the Eastern Tang dynasty have achieved this level of cultivation. For a Viking barbarian like Loki, who had no idea what cultivation meant, the unsharpened stone sword was nothing more than an ordinary iron rod in his hands. But in the next moment, Loki made old Valder realize his mistake. He had indeed not accumulated a single ounce of spiritual energy within him. But as a member of the Starlag family, his power was unparalleled. The stone sword split old Valder's head with a low humming sound. When the edgeless heavy sword struck his skull, old Valder felt as if a mountain had struck him. The simple, primitive sword strike sent stars darting through his eyes and spitting blood. Meanwhile, the Vikings behind him drew their massive axes and slashed at his back. Puff, puff, puff. Vikings, chopping people for a living. They might not be experts at chopping wood, but when it came to chopping people, no one was more skilled. With a few blows, old Valder's tendons, hamstrings, knees, and wrists were severed. Under extreme odds, he crawled across the ground at breakneck speed, barely escaping the Viking encirclement. He once again summoned the artifact that had once parted the sea, the Mark of Blood Sacrifice, attempting to soar into the air. However, he faced a group of Viking warriors braced for battle. The garrison captain, Satyr, silently pulled out the lasso from his back and expertly tossed it into the air. It wrapped precisely around old Valder's neck, and like a kite, the Vikings instantly yanked him down from the sky. Damn it. If I were you, I'd just stay hidden in the city. I really don't know who gave you the courage to come out and fight 10 people one-on-one. Loki raised his stone sword again and smashed it down. Though the heavy sword had no edge, it was powerful enough to easily split old Valder's neck, inflicting a gruesome wound. The axe had precisely severed his aorta. Thick blood, mixed with broken blood vessels, spurted out of his body. But then, Loki realized something was amiss. Suddenly, they were enveloped in a crimson mist. Upon closer inspection, he saw that the faint mist was evaporating from Oldvalder's blood that had fallen to the ground. Above the pools of blood, a faint blood-color mist rose vertically into the air, now filling the air around them all. Oldvalder laughed dryly as he sat up. Nearly every joint in his body was shattered, even his neck, shattered by Loki's stone sword. His head hung limply from his neck, held only by a layer of skin. My young Vikings, I can only say, you know nothing of the power of the gods. He raised his hands. As he did so, Loki and the Vikings around him felt as if all the blood in their bodies had been stirred by him, rushing to the surface at a rapid pace. Then, with a burst of excruciating pain, their skin began to ooze crystal-clear crimson blood beads. These beads lingered for a brief moment before transforming into streams of blood mist, flowing into Oldvalder's raised hands. What was this? Before Loki could even begin to wonder, he noticed that Oldvalder's emaciated body, having just absorbed the blood, was rapidly healing. Meanwhile, he and the Vikings around him felt their strength greatly weakened by the massive blood loss. The Vikings were only momentarily distracted. Then, each exchanged glances, axes raised, and charged at Oldvalder. The battle memories ingrained in their blood told them they must not engage in a protracted battle with this old man. To win, we must unleash our valor while we still have strength and finish him off with a burst of bloody courage. The Viking warriors rushed forward, axes raised high. The leading satyr leaped forward, slashing through the air after reaching 3 meters. A family of satyrs, hunters for generations, in the uninhabited mountains, his powerful leaping strike could even kill a bear man with a single blow. However, mid-air, just as his axe was about to penetrate Oldvalder's skull, he chuckled, spun around, and vanished in a rising cloud of blood. What the hell? How could we possibly fight this kind of idiot? Loki rubbed his eyes vigorously, but as he lowered his head slightly, he spotted 2 blue mushroom-like plants growing from the fluorescent coral not far below. Blue mushrooms? I think I've seen them in books. Quickly flipping through the overall atlas of the world in his pocket, he found the page with the blue mushrooms. After taking a second to confirm the efficacy of this thing, he picked the 2 mushrooms and swallowed them whole. The next second, steam immediately rose from his skin, as if it were burning with flames. Chapter 18 Loki vs. Father Ward. Retreat, everyone, get out of the blood mist, Loki shouted. 10 of his companions followed his command and retreated in unison. His body ablaze with crimson, stone sword in hand, charged into the red mist. Seeing Loki enter, Oldvalder emerged from the red mist once more. Hey, young man, sometimes I really admire you brutes whose brains are only your muscles. Ignorance is often a kind of bliss. Facing Loki's stone sword, Oldvalder didn't flinch. The stone sword struck his forehead with thunderous force, like an iron rod hitting a soft egg. His eyeballs turned crimson, and blood spurted from his nostrils and mouth. Haha. It's useless, it's really useless. Oldvalder gently raised his left hand, his fingers tightening. Loki felt as if his heart were being gripped in his palm. 2 seconds later, he vomited a large mouthful of blood. The blood immediately turned into mist as it met the air, drifting to Oldvalder's left palm and rapidly seeping into his body. As the blood from his heart was absorbed into his body, Oldvalder's head, like a shattered doll, began to rapidly heal. However, Loki felt a wave of weakness deep within his soul. Within this impenetrable crimson mist, Oldvalder was truly invincible. This was his first direct battle with the Chosen One in 20 years of living in the other world. The vast disparity between mortals and the Chosen One was laid bare before him. But Loki refused to give up. He propped himself up with his stone sword and roared again, charging. With each blood draw from Oldvalder, he weakened a little. A few more draws and he would be in a precarious position, unable to move. Haha, you're a man of great resilience, but I still want to tell you, it's no use. Oldvalder's figure vanished once more within the blood mist, reappearing behind Loki. 30 years ago, by chance, I killed Moyikwin, obtained this ancient book, and also received the seal of blood sacrifice from him. The moment I saw this seal, I knew the ancient legend of the Crimson Creator must be true. The seal of blood sacrifice granted me the status of a follower of the Crimson Creator, and with this identity, I successfully entered the Illuminati. The Illuminati's mission is to search the world for the techniques of evil gods. Through the Illuminati's secret and vast network of connections, I have spent 20 years trying to find a passage into Hohenheim. I know that one of the blood creator's inner cores is within it. If I consume the ancient god's inner core, I will be able to travel through space, shed my status as a follower, and become a true god. Haha, can you imagine what that would feel like? With that, old Valder's blood-drawing skill cooldown ended. He opened his arms and drew another large mouthful of blood from Loki's body. Losing too much blood from the continuous battle, Loki was no longer able to stand. He held his stone sword with both hands, forcing himself to stay afloat. For 30 years, I've meticulously searched every inch of land along the Baltic Sea's periphery. I never imagined I'd find a way into the sunken city through you. Haha, I'm destined to be the one to obtain the ancient legacy of the bloody creator, and you will be the first prey to succumb to the blood god's might. Opening his arms again, old Valder gazed toward the dome, a vast, pure blood energy coalescing between his hands. Not far in front of him, Loki was now so weak he could barely stand. His Viking companions, not far away, tried to charge into the blood mist, but he, in his dying breath, rebuked them and retreated. Ha ha ha, Loki chuckled darkly, his weakness weakening. Ahem, so-called gods are all bullshit, only knowledge can change destiny. You old man got the book, but you can't even read it all. Haha. Now it's time to pay your debt. The blood mist dissipated slightly, revealing that Loki's lips had turned a bluish-purple color. I don't know if I can leave this city alive today, but this much I know, you will die here. As soon as he finished speaking, he spat out a mouthful of emerald blue blood. The cold, deep blue glared against the crimson mist, like a blue flower blooming on red cloth. Meanwhile, not far away, old Valder, who was about to deliver the finishing blow, felt a similar pain in his chest. The sudden pain caused him to arch his body like a cooked shrimp. He reached out a trembling hand to hold down his violently beating heart, and he, too, began to vomit blood uncontrollably. And his blood was also emerald blue. Haha, Loki swiped the blue blood from the corner of his mouth, chuckling dryly. With his remaining strength, he picked up a piece of blue coral from the ground. Lam Shan, when I first started reading, this thing was the only plant I remembered, because its name is exactly the same as the coffee I often drank in my previous life. Lam Shan, a small piece of coral with a deep blue color and a slightly green skirt. It often grows among the luminous algae on the ground. Lam Shan is similar to the blood-soaked stone reef, both species brought from the outer realm when the outer gods fell into Kyushu. This thing is extremely poisonous to mortals. If accidentally ingested, it will contaminate the entire bloodstream. Within a short period of time, all blood will turn dark blue. Within an hour, all blood will freeze into blue sand, and the body will explode and die. Warning, frequent feeding will greatly accelerate the infection. Loki had just flipped through the book and needed to double-check this last sentence. Frequent feeding will greatly accelerate the infection. Observing old Valder's fighting style, he found that the old man's attack method was extremely simple. In the blood mist, he only possessed the single move of blood-sucking, lacking any physical attacks. So, when he saw the blue skill, poisonous corals beneath his feet, he swallowed two without hesitation, transforming all his blood into poison. In the subsequent 1v1 duel with Old Ward, each time Old Ward drew a stream of blood from him, it was equivalent to consuming a blue skill poisonous mushroom. The overall map of the world clearly states that frequent feeding greatly increases the speed of infection. And now, it was clear that Old Ward's poison was taking effect. Cough, cough, cough. Under the virulent attack of the poison, Old Ward's entire head had turned a deep blue. He stretched out his hands to grip his neck, a long blue tongue jutting out of his mouth. Thick, muddy, deep blue blood continuously dripped down his tongue and onto the ground. The blood was so thick that it filled his blood vessels within a minute. Old Ward was like a tangled mass of red and blue wires, unable to move an inch. In contrast, Loki had only consumed the blue coral once, and his poisoning symptoms were greatly alleviated. Grasping the stone sword once more, he struggled to his feet and walked over to Old Valder. Reaching out his slightly swollen hand, he grasped his hair and pulled it back forcefully. Remember, knowledge changes destiny. If you're reborn in your next life, remember to study more. Cough, cough, cough. Old Valder tried to speak, but he was now suffocated by layers of a strange, ethereal poison. He could do nothing more than clamp his hands around his neck artery. He shouldered the greatsword, and in the next second, the stone sword scraped against the air, emitting a low, humming sound. With a muffled puff, the demon's sealing blade struck his temple like an iron rod smashing a watermelon. His brain splattered, and the Illuminati priest, Old Valder, died instantly. Loki, Meanwhile, died in his final moments, his heart pierced by the intense blue poison from the repeated battles. Chapter 19 Blood Mist Illusion. As the old saying goes, even ants try to survive. Loki had just slain his first formidable foe, so he certainly didn't want to die. But at this moment, the Lanshan poison had already penetrated his bloodstream. He felt a tingling sensation throughout his body, as if soaking in warm water. Even his consciousness gradually blurred amidst the extreme comfort. This was a sign of paralysis. He only had a few minutes left. Using his hands and feet, he crawled to Old Valder's body. He searched his body thoroughly, finally picking up the seal of blood sacrifice from the sand beneath his feet. After obtaining this ancient artifact imbued with miraculous power, he reached behind him and pulled out the white jade box he had dug from the body of Zhuangzi underground. Opening it, a bead resembling warm jade lay quietly within. Upon closer inspection, the bead seemed to be alive, with something pulsing within it. It's said that when a person is nearing death, their thoughts become extremely clear. They see images of their entire life, even images forgotten deep within their memories. Loki possessed a fierce desire to survive. He struggled to recall the records he had just read from Zhuangzi's bamboo slips. However, when the divine elixir appeared, we discovered we had all fallen prey to a vast conspiracy. This divine elixir was actually... These two sentences were the last two words Loki read from the bamboo slips. What exactly was this elixir in his hand, as smooth as jade and beating like a living heart? What conspiracy had they encountered? In the end, Gu Changqing of the Hongbang sword sect even used the demon sealing blade to kill Zhuangzi, who was buried in the earth? His frantic brain work had drained his energy immensely. Even lifting his eyelids felt like a struggle. As consciousness faded, he caught sight of the massive black raven again from the corner of his eye. When there's no way out, follow Odin's messenger. Suddenly, the final words spoken to him by Erhe the seer resurfaced in his mind. Unable to open his eyes, just as eternal darkness threatened to engulf him, a raven landed beside him. With its black, horny beak, it gently lifted the red pill from his hand and forcefully thrust it into his mouth. Opening his eyes again, Loki found himself plummeting. Am I dead? Midair, he glanced at his body and discovered he was still suffering from the blue mushroom poisoning. But now, his heart was beating hard, pumping the thick blue blood throughout his body. Looking around, he saw a thick, blood-red fog surrounding him. As he descended, the temperature grew hotter and hotter until he landed on a mat of tough hair. Each strand was as large as a small tree. He raised his stone sword and cleaved through the coarse fur, finding himself atop a giant beast as tall as a mountain. This beast had clearly been dead for a long time. He slid down the fur onto the beast's body. Only after landing did he realize it was a massive beast, the shape of a bull. So enormous was the bull's body that its glaring eyes alone were almost as tall as his own. Catch his blood. Suddenly, those three words reached his ears. Loki looked around in astonishment, but saw nothing. I am Gu Changqing, sealed within the stone sword. In my final moments, I separated a strand of my soul and inhabited the sword of sealing demons. This place is filled with abundant spiritual energy, allowing a strand of my spirit to temporarily awaken and converse with you. Upon hearing these words, Loki hurriedly picked up the stone sword. He saw that the writing on its back had vanished, replaced by a complex, intricately patterned sigil. No time to chat? See this 10-meter tall bull in front of you? It's called Kishin and is an ancient creature herded by the barbarians of the fairy island Penglay. Penglay? The Penglay from the 8 immortals crossing the sea. Loki had more than 10,000 questions in his mind and he didn't know where to start. See that wound on Kishin's neck? This must be the place where an ancient master cultivated. He only took Kishin's heart blood, forsaking all the treasures of his body. Such a person is not someone you and I can afford to offend. Throw the demon sealing blade into Kishin's neck and draw out its blood. Kishin's blood essence will keep me conscious. Your constitution is weaker than the soft giant clams on the seabed. Drink a few sips of its blood and it will temporarily relieve the poison in you. The swordsman who had suddenly awakened within the stone sword clearly bore no ill will. Loki obediently walked to the wound on Kishin's neck, inserted the stone sword into the cascading river of blood, and drank 2 sips. The giant bull's blood didn't have a strong fishy odor upon entering his mouth, but rather tasted like a thick liquor. Within seconds, he felt slightly tipsy. As expected, the tightness in his chest was greatly alleviated. Just take a sip, don't drink too much. Although Kishin is a low-level divine beast, the spiritual energy contained in its blood is too fast for your mortal body to absorb. Senior, What exactly happened in the sleeping city that caused you to die there before your death, and even stabbed another senior with your sword? This was the question Loki urgently needed to know. Haha, wasn't it because you swallowed the ancient god's pill that you were able to enter this space? The great Kinki cultivators all believed that the search for the ancient gods was to refine the elixir of immortality, but no one imagined the king's desire is not the immortality pill at all. He used secret techniques to refine the ancient gods in order to obtain a portal to their birthplace. The first emperor was not satisfied with simply ruling the entire Kyushu. He wanted to use the Kin cavalry to tame the cosmos, hunt down the outer gods to the outer realms, and become the master of all realms. Loki took a breath. He didn't know if other emperors in the history of the Red Kingdom could do such a thing, but he believed Qin Shi Huang. Because he was the only crazy person who tried to take ghost soldiers with him when he died, hoping to continue fighting after his death. In his heart, there was only one thing: to unify the world. It's a pity that mortals in the world can get close to gods, but when we encounter the truly terrifying ancient gods, we are no match for them. Gu Chanking sighed. Loki looked around and suddenly felt the weakness of the mortal body. He struggled to move forward in the pile of corpses formed by various giant beasts. In this red foggy space, the corpses of unknown giant beasts were everywhere. When passing through a narrow rift, a huge turtle-like beast fell from the sky like a meteorite, smashing a huge deep pit in the ground. Zuanwu. That was actually a newly dead mythical beast Zuanwu. This is a rare treasure. Legend has it that it takes 8,000 years for a black tortoise's eggs to hatch, and 100,000 years for the young to mature. This old fellow who lives here only took the black tortoise's eye and left without even the shell. I really don't know which rich man is so wasteful. Gu Chanking, a key refining scholar from the pre-Qin period, exclaimed in amazement. And Loki didn't know how to respond. After entering this blood mist space, everything he saw was severely challenging his common sense as an atheist. Loki walked a long way, and when he encountered a giant beast blocking the way, he waved the stone sword to clear the way. He was surprised to find that here, the edgeless stone sword was as sharp as a laser. Gu Chanking explained that this was because the spiritual energy here was abundant. Sword of Sealing Demons is a weapon that excels at sword energy. When a cultivator has not cultivated spiritual energy in his body, this thing is no different from a heavy stick. But if it is soaked in abundant spiritual energy, this sword can cut off everything in the world, even the body of an ancient god. He stopped talking halfway, because as Loki walked out of the valley, the two of them looked into the distance and saw three giants. Three blood-red giants stood atop a sea of blood. These three giants stood hundreds of meters tall. Amidst the swirling crimson mist, Loki could only discern their legs. Their upper bodies seemed to be suspended in the clouds. He could only vaguely make out a massive figure swinging its hammer, striking a towering iron inkstone. Atop the inkstone stood a figure shimmering in golden light. As the three hammers, each shaped in a different way, continued to strike down, dazzling bolts of lightning erupted from the golden figure. Finally, one of the giants embedded 2 points of cold light into the golden figure's eye sockets, and the figure spread its wings and took flight. As the golden-winged figure flapped its wings, streaks of golden lightning pierced the thick fog like sharp swords, filling half of the blood-red sky with a holy golden glow. The magnificent yet somewhat eerie scene before him made the knowledgeable Gu Chanking stutter. They're actually creating gods. Chapter 20 Giants 3 Hammers. After the golden spirit ascended, neither Gu Chanking nor Loki spoke for a long moment. Back then, the divine elixir appeared, the first of its kind, smelted for years. Haha, the alchemist Shen Gong believed it was no ordinary elixir, and he became greedy. He took advantage of our inattention and attempted to devour the elixir, but the right guard of demon sealing, Zhuan Hizi, was a fervent follower of the king. He keenly sensed Shen Gong's intentions and used the magical instrument to imprison him. However, he didn't expect the ancient divine elixir Shen Gong had taken to be a medicinal inducement. The elixir, his psychic energy, and Zhu Hizi's restraints collided, causing him to explode and die. The power of the psychic explosion shattered the spatial and temporal barrier between Sunken Water City and the outer god's homeland. A horde of pitch-black fallen titans began pouring into Sunken Water City from the portal. Although it was only a wisp of soul inhabiting the stone sword, Loki could sense the fear deep within Gu Chanking's voice. Unless you experience that horror, you'll never understand. You were able to swallow the ancient god's inner elixir without exploding, perhaps because you lack a single psychic energy. Loki nodded. Having lived as a Viking for over 20 years, he had only heard of Tang Dynasty sword cultivators who could fly with swords. As for psychic energy, cultivation, he had absolutely no experience whatsoever. Above the Red Sea, these three god-creating old men are so powerful. Do you see that palace behind them, towering over the Red Sea? Oh, you're only mortal, so it doesn't matter if you can't see it. A true master wouldn't do the manual labor of a lowly person. I'm afraid we won't even see the true master hiding in that palace. After Loki uttered these three sentences in his mind, for some unknown reason, Gu Chanking successfully attracted the attention of the three blood-red giants. One of them, with his back to Loki, gently crouched down and, as if picking up an ant, picked up Loki with two giant fingers. The red mist filled the air, and Loki could only see the shadowy, flame-like eyes atop the giant's long, narrow head, and the golden crown crowned with three thin horns. He gently laid the tiny Loki down on the iron inkstone. The three giant heads looked down, communicating in a strange whisper that Loki couldn't understand. Their spiritual pressure is too strong. I can't hold on any longer. Let's retreat. These were Gu Chanking's last words. The three giants exchanged words in an unknown whisper for a long time. Finally, the one wearing the crown raised his massive hammer. Loki focused his gaze and saw that it was the size of a mammoth. The hammer ignited in mid-air and came crashing down with a thunderous roar like a meteor. However, the blow struck not Loki, but Gu Chanking's stone sword beside him. The stone sword wailed under the weight of the blow. Just as it was about to shatter, the fire giant beside the crown giant extended its massive hand, and a wisp of white flame enveloped the tiny stone blade. The shattered stone blades began to rapidly fuse, eventually forming the shape of a stone axe. Its size and material were identical to the one Loki remembered his father giving him. The crown giant nodded and withdrew his hand. The fire giant beside him raised his hammer, aiming for Loki's chest. With one blow, all the deep blue blood in Loki's body gushed out. The fire giant reached out and grabbed it, his giant hand made of flame instantly evaporating the blood. Lost of all his blood, Loki lay soundlessly in the center of the inkstone. He could still see and feel, but he was completely unable to move. The three giants exchanged whispers for a long time, until the crown giant finally triumphed over the other two. As his crimson gaze pierced his chest, Loki felt the inkstone beneath his back rapidly heat up, reaching a temperature almost unbearable for an ordinary person. He struggled to stand, but the crown giant snatched up a golden beast from the bottom of the inkstone. The blinding golden light, like razor-sharp swords, tried to pierce the bloody mist before him. Is this a killing? The bloody mist made it impossible to see what the giant held in his hands, but Loki knew it was no ordinary animal seen in the zoo of his previous life. It was as massive as a whale. The next second, the giant's fingers shifted slightly, easily slicing open the monster's chest. Hot, thick blood poured down on Loki. The warm blood, upon contact with a blazing iron inkstone, instantly transformed into an even hotter, thicker red mist. Within this red mist, Loki could see nothing, yet he could feel his body madly absorbing the mist. The stone axe beside him, made of the same material as the demon-sealing blade, was also absorbing the blood mist, rapidly turning red. Loki could feel his heart pounding with the surging energy and blood. He struggled to sit up again, only to see a flaming iron hammer as huge as a hill suddenly crash down upon his head. Amidst a blinding red mist and flames, Loki completely lost consciousness. Wake up, boss, wake up. Waking up again, Loki found himself back in the sunken city. Struggling to his feet, he discovered he had fully recovered from the blue goodness poison. However, raising his arm, he discovered a flood of strange characters covering his body. These characters resembled the cuneiform script of the Mesopotamian region, but even more astonishingly, he recognized them all. This body was created by the bloody creator, King Raphael. This body is the Red God Path, one of the 3 upgrade paths offered by the bloody creator's subordinates. Sequence level, Sequence 9, Sequence name, Knife-wielding ghoul. This path is unique in this era, and only one exists every 1,800 years. Products from Raphael must be top-notch. Can you see the characters on my body? Loki turned his head and asked, but his companions around him shook their heads. It seems that this thing can only be seen by myself. A huge red stone axe lay beside him. From the outside, this thing has completely lost the appearance of the demon-sealing blade. The slender horned giant completely changed the shape of the weapon with a hammer. At this time, the axe was like a piece of red glass melted by high temperature, Integrated, simple and desolate. Holding it in his hand, he could feel the axe as a part of his body extending outward. The frequency of the pulse beating was exactly the same. Perhaps this is what knife-wielding ghoul means. How did I survive, boss? Your body suddenly disappeared just now, and it reappeared. A red hole suddenly appeared in the air, and you and the giant axe fell out of the hole, and the raven. Captain Sartre pointed at the raven standing quietly behind Loki. Struggling to his feet, Loki had already put aside all his contempt for Alhe, the knower. How many times had this seemingly ordinary raven saved him? 2 or 3 at least. He also put aside his contempt for all gods. This world bore many similarities to the earth he had experienced in his previous life, yet there were also significant differences. The crimson axe quietly resting beside him assured him that everything he had just experienced in his fiery dream was real. Those 3 terrifying gods could easily alter the structure of the stone sword. He wondered if Gu Chanking, who had only just survived within the stone sword, had been shattered by the impact. Picking up the axe, Loki rose to his feet. The body of Elder Valder of the Illuminati still stood not far away. The blue blood that had flowed out quickly solidified, and he had now become a cyan blue statue of flesh and blood. Even more terrifying was the dense mass of blue skill spores now covering his upright, solidified corpse. In just a few minutes, his entire body was covered in this terrifying blue coral. This thing actually feeds on human flesh and blood. With a long sigh, Loki relinquished his desire to examine old Valder's body. In Frostwater Village, he had only noticed the all-seeing eye emblem on his chest, not his arms. Now, he longed to know which of the 3 paths of the Scarlet Creator old Valder's vampire-like abilities belonged to. He had a hunch that this person must be one of his own. Sequence 9, Knife-Wielding Ghoul. These words always sounded both lowly and terrifying. But now, by chance, he had finally become the chosen one. His brothers were still bound in this underwater city. The most urgent task was to find a way back to the surface. Chapter 21, Fallen Titan. A brief struggle among mortals was but a fleeting moment for a city that existed for eternity. After a brief rest and a meal filled with the ship's remaining food, Loki and the Viking warriors drew up their weapons and continued their march towards the city's center. Remarkably, he also donned the white robe worn by the deceased Black Crane's son. This seemingly ordinary garment, having endured millennia without decay, possessed a unique and miraculous quality. Another loot he had taken was the blood sacrifice seal, now clutched tightly in his hand. Although he hadn't spoken with old Valder, his intuition told him that escaping this silent, tomb-like city would require the seal he had used upon entry. As for how to activate it, Loki still had no idea. As they advanced, they gradually moved from the city's periphery to its heart. Judging from the floor plan alone, the structure of sunken City of Hohenheim resembled many Viking towns Loki had seen. A single, rusty gate separated the outer and inner city walls. The sight of this door further confirmed Loki's belief that, millennia ago, the inhabitants were giants around 5 meters tall. 10 Viking warriors, exerting their combined strength, finally pushed open the heavy stone door. Upon entering the city, the first thing they saw was a terrifying mountain of corpses. They were towering, humanoid creatures, their bodies as black as ink. Their flesh had long since dried out after their deaths. However, after millennia of erosion, their skin had developed a glaze, resembling a patina and possessing the texture of ceramic. If my guess is correct, these creatures must be the fallen titans Gu Chanking had mentioned in the blood mist illusion. According to the records in Zhuan Hezi's bamboo slips, 7 people entered the sleeping city, defeated the fallen titan, and 4 flew out to continue other missions. Only 3 people remained in the city at the time. After the alchemist's death from coveting the elixir, the only survivors were Gu Chanking of the Hongmeng Sword Sect and Zhu Hizi, the right guard of the Demon Sealing Sect. The passage connecting the 2 worlds was opened, and a horde of fallen titans appeared. These 2 remaining pre-Qin Shi refining masters slaughtered so many of them. No wonder Qin Shi Huang harbored such terrifying ambitions thousands of years ago. If these powerful ancient cultivators commanded 1,000 men, he would truly possess the strength to conquer the outer god's homeworld. Hey, boss, these black giants' weapons look impressive to me. Much more powerful than the scrap iron axe I have. The attendants gathered behind him, approaching the black giant, drawing their daggers from their waists and slashing with force. Ha! They hold daggers, but we carry great swords. Perfect, you've carried my dad out here for half a month without any work. It would be embarrassing to go home without something. The companions nodded in agreement. A thief never leaves empty-handed is a principle deeply ingrained in the Vikings' souls. And these children, barely 20 years old, clearly had a much easier time accepting the gods than Loki. The fine swords instantly dispelled the fear of the mountain of corpses before them. Viking warriors were taught from childhood that only those who died in battle could enter Valhalla. For them, a handy weapon was more important than life itself. Hey, this thing works great. I wonder how long it's still sharp. And the weight is just right for me. It's not just the weight. This pitch-black weapon is perfect for the night. Imagine, in pitch darkness, with a pitch-black blade swung at you, who can see clearly. Hurry, get it to me. Seeing that their leader, Loki, had no objections, Captain Satyr, with his backhand, expertly pulled out a rope and tied all the gathered giant daggers into a secure bundle. Besides the dagger at the black giant's waist, pick up whatever you can of the scattered daggers and broken axes. We've been out at sea for half a month, and we still haven't found a fraction of the steel on the ground. Let's go back to the village and see if we can melt this stuff. If it can, we need to make nails and continue building the ship, the Viking warriors shouted, working furiously. In the Middle Ages, low smelting efficiency made all kinds of metals extremely valuable. This might be the first time in the lives of these Viking warriors that they could obtain such a large amount of high-quality metal for free, without having to fight. The pirates were like chicken blood, excited to harvest these precious metals. Only 10 of them had entered the sunken city, but they still had over 30 brothers at home who were capable of taking up arms. Fighting alone would not be enough to protect their homeland. They needed the strength of their companions to better resist the enemy. Loki left them to clean up the battlefield while he, holding aloft a blazing blood-soaked reef, continued toward the center of the dark city. Entering the city, he found massive corpses everywhere. He pushed open a random door and found 2 towering giants sprawled over a dining table, a trail of congealed black blood oozing from it. Over the course of countless years, the black blood had solidified, drying into wrinkled, black hide. Grabbing their bodies, now slightly smooth from patina, Loki climbed onto the tabletop and discovered that the fatal wounds had come from their temples. If his suspicions were correct, these men had been pierced through the skull from left to right by a weapon similar to a bullet. Considering the broken sword lying beside Zhuanghezi's body, it was highly likely he had been the wielder. So, it seems these reddened figures must be the normal followers of the Crimson Creator. They carry no weapons, nor do they bear any serial number insignia on their arms, and outside, those fallen titans, clad in pitch black and fully armed, must be the troops of the Crimson Creator. Loki sat quietly at the long table, his back against the dead head of the red giant. Glancing around the room, in the dim light of his torch, he spotted a number of worn stone slabs, withered plants, and dried animal specimens. Is it possible they followed the Crimson Creator to Earth for some kind of scientific expedition? Just like the human colonization of Mars he'd seen on TV in his previous life, walking slowly along the long table, he almost confirmed his suspicions when he came upon a desiccated mammoth skull. He'd seen many of these things before. The Slavs specialized in training mammoths for hauling. This thing was found in the Slavic mountains across the Baltic Sea. If this group entered Earth with the purpose of collecting specimens for research, there must be a way out of this base, otherwise, these giants wouldn't have to swim back to the surface from tens of thousands of meters deep every time, after a round of searching. Finding nothing worth collecting, Loki was about to slide back to the surface along the giant's corpse when he heard the fluttering of wings again. Turning back, he saw the great black raven again. It landed in front of him, pecked the ground twice, then took off and flew to the door. Loki hurriedly climbed down from the test bench. After so many near-death experiences, follow the raven had become a subconscious instinct. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22 Moyikwan Studio. Following the raven, Loki swiftly moved through the dark city, torch held high. The closer he got to the city center, the more dead giants he saw. Their deaths varied. Some lay dead in the street clutching specimens, others lay on windowsills pierced through the chest by a sword. Even after 1,000 years, Loki could still recall the bloody images of the pre-Kin cultivators slaughtering the inhabitants of the Outlands. In all his heart, Loki had killed before. But all that slaughter was driven by survival. The living environment in Scandinavia was too harsh. To survive, It was either you or me, no third option. Throughout his life, Loki had never killed simply to satisfy his lust for conquest. Even if they weren't native to Kyushu, he'd slaughtered them all for the vague purpose of I want immortality, I need to refine the elixir, what's your business, destroying you. Even after 2 lifetimes, he still couldn't answer that question. The raven, flying and stopping, led him to a palace with a complex landscape. To avoid getting lost, Loki stopped every few dozen meters to carve a label with a stone axe crafted by the Crimson Creator. Why had they forged the demon-sealing blade in Gu Chanking's hand into the shape of his father's axe? Loki didn't know the answer. But the fact that the weapon felt much smoother to wield was undeniable. After walking and climbing for hundreds of meters, Loki had almost forgotten his way back, for the palace was simply too vast. Running through it with a torch held high, he could see the palace's lofty dome, built in the Gothic style. The slender, towering arched walls were covered in intricate murals. Though the murals were hazy with age, they still showed the meticulous care the red giants had put into their construction. Even 1,000 years ago, these outer gods had been on Earth for quite some time. As he continued running, Loki noticed that his physical strength had improved significantly. He hadn't felt tired even after running at such high speed for so long. After turning the last corner, the raven suddenly stopped, and Loki also paused. His eyes widened, his gaze fixed on everything before him. All along his journey, he had seen nothing but giants of enormous size, their creations, their houses, and so on. But after turning this corner, he found himself faced with a kerosene lamp, the kind used by ordinary humans. Hesitantly approaching the lamp, he reached out and lit the oil. Taking a closer sniff, he discovered that the oil was surprisingly fragrant. It was a completely different material from the cheap, fuming Viking oil. Loki frowned. Millennia had passed, and everything in the sunken city had been dried to a withered state by the merciless wind. If this lamp had been from 1,000 years ago, the oil would undoubtedly have dried to a filmy consistency, devoid of all moisture. Yet, the lamp was still at least half full. The wick could even be ignited by striking the flint with an axe. This lamp was so new. Holding the oil lamp, Loki felt his hands tremble slightly. There was only one explanation for the lamp before him. It was a personal item left behind in the sunken city by Moyiquin, the Tang Dynasty painter who created the overall map of the world. This raven, which had saved his life countless times, had once again led him to Moyiquin's relic in the sunken city. Rumor has it that ravens are Odin's messengers on Earth. 2 ravens perched on his shoulders. One capable of seeing the past, the other the future. Loki now completely believed this rumor, which sounded full of feudal superstition. This large raven, gifted to him by Erhe the seer, must have the ability to see into the past, allowing it to accurately locate this lamp in such a vast city. Otherwise, Loki and his 10 Viking warriors might not be able to find it even after a year of searching. Oil lamp in hand, Loki gently pushed open the normal-sized door before him. Beyond the door, he unexpectedly found a hall bathed in soft light. This hall measured approximately 700 or 800 square meters. 3 enormous cages were evenly spaced on either side. Each cage held a fluorescent jellyfish, a yings, with a luminous skeleton. 6 enormous jellyfish floated lazily within the cages, their glow making the entire room resemble an incandescent light. Even in pure white, the room's uniform light illuminated the workbench in the center. Neatly arranged upon it were papers, pens, and various colors of gold powder and paint. Nothing in this room bore any trace of age. It was pristine, as if the occupant had simply stepped out to pick up a takeout meal. Entering the room, Loki gently reached out and touched the thin layer of dust on the tabletop. It was now almost certain that this well-sized studio was the workspace where the Tang artist Moyiquin had worked. The general map of the world, submerged city volume in his arms must have been created in this very room. He could even sense himself, alone, torch in hand, enduring the loneliness and darkness, wandering through this tomb-like dead city, retrieving various specimens from various locations, bringing them back to his house for careful study and illustration. Old Board had mentioned that he, too, had discovered this city for the first time. He had also mentioned that Moyiquin had met his end by chance. He had taken the seal of blood sacrifice from Moyiquin's hand. This indicated that, through his long research, Moyiquin must have discovered a method for traveling between the submerged city and the surface. In the center of the house stood a red totem. It was a crimson skull, with 2 lines running from top to bottom, carving out the outline of the brow bone and extending naturally downward to become the bridge of the nose. The only difference between this giant and a normal human was a diamond-shaped notch between his eyebrows. Was this a cyclops, or? Simply from the appearance, this totem-like giant statue bore a strong resemblance to the ancient giant heads found on Easter Island. But the giant statues of Easter Island, standing tall on the desolate island, were enormous. This statue, in terms of scale, didn't quite match the 5-meter height of the deceased giant outside. At this size, converted to normal human scale, it would be roughly a figurine of the giant. Reaching out and stroking the diamond-shaped socket between the eyebrows, Loki felt a striking resemblance to the seal of blood sacrifice in his pocket. He pulled out the diamond-shaped seal and carefully examined its size. Just as he was about to try to insert it between the giant's eyebrows, he heard 2 sudden thuds from behind, a bird's beak tapping on the tabletop. Chapter 23 The Road Out of the City. Turning back at the sound, Loki saw a letter written on a thick book on the table. Respecting the Holy Emperor, thousands of years ago, Qin Shi Huang unified China, and countless nations came to pay homage. In the early days of his empire, the first emperor was quite patient with foreign nations and their unique beliefs. As long as they sent envoys to the Central Plains to pay tribute, he would accept them as his subjects. For this reason, the first emperor commissioned pre-Qin Kigan practitioners to compile a map of tributes from various tribes under heaven, a comprehensive map of the 9 provinces, demanding a detailed understanding of the appearance, characteristics, ancestral homeland, and living habits of all tribute-paying subjects. Reading this, Loki noticed a piece of soft deerskin beneath the letter. Unfolding it, he revealed a hand-painted world map. On one side, the words map of tributes from various tribes under heaven were inscribed in large letters. However, many details on the map differed from what he remembered. The first emperor had the will, but the Qin dynasty's national strength was insufficient to sustain such a lengthy and arduous undertaking. In the early days of the Qin Empire, the population was only a few tens of millions, less than 1/10 of the prosperous Tang dynasty. Under these circumstances, sending Kigan practitioners to search for all civilizations in the world is simply impossible. While the Atlas of Tributes from various tribes under heaven contains numerous forgeries and fabrications, for example, the story of the 8 immortals crossing the sea to Penglai is completely fabricated, it also records many remote and secluded locations. For example, the sleeping city of Hohenheim. After extensive investigation, I have confirmed its existence. During my initial visit, I discovered instances of Kigan practitioners from the pre-Qin period slaughtering foreigners and subsequently killing each other within the city. I am responsible for compiling the overall Atlas of the World, volume on the submerged city, and wonder if this section should be included in the book. The purpose of compiling this atlas is to showcase the image of our great nation. If a Western reader were to misinterpret this atlas and believe our celestial empire is filled with cruel, bloodthirsty, and murderous people, I fear it would be discredited by the Eastern Tang. Prince Li Yu, our consul general in Constantinople on the Western continent, has ordered me to bring Volume 5 of the General Atlas of the World to meet with envoys from the Kingdom of Northumbria in England to demonstrate the strength of the Tang dynasty. I am about to depart, and I am carrying a simplified version with all sensitive content removed. The actual, compiled detailed volume of the sunken city will be sent to Chang'an along with this letter for the Holy Emperor's perusal. Note, I have heard that the Holy Emperor is very interested in pre-Qin Kigan practitioners. I have discovered the remains of a pre-Qin Kigan practitioner in the sunken city. Based on my inference, if the ancient divine inner elixir truly exists, it is most likely within the remains of this fallen soldier. As a historian, I dare not touch it. The disposition of this remains is left to the Holy Emperor, Minister, Mo Yiquan. Beneath this letter, a volume 3 times thicker than the one in my hand, rests on Volume 5 of the General Atlas of the World. I open this dictionary-like volume. Loki discovered that the illustrations in this book were far more detailed than those in his own. The original atlas only depicted a map of the city and its flora, with no description of the people who lived there or the specific events that took place. However, this book meticulously depicted the dead red giants, the fallen titans, their weapons and equipment, and the battles inferred from their death trappings. Loki was astonished by the volume's thickness and the sheer volume of battles it contained. If Mo Yiquan were to complete this immense workload alone, he would have to live alone for years in this tomb-like ruined city. Everyone needs to eat. How did he manage? Following the raven, Loki discovered that the city contained only fine ocean sand, no soil, and no vegetation at all. The enormous red giants might have been able to eat the coral and seaweed growing outside the city, but they were highly toxic to humans. Furthermore, the darkness outside was nearly impenetrable. All edible crops required sunlight, they simply could not grow here. Moyiquin worked alone, working alone. Even if he could carry food several times his own weight like an ant, he'd still only need a month to finish it. He must have a way to quickly travel back and forth between the surface and the underground. Meanwhile, Loki remembered a name, Prince Liu. Moyiquin, carrying the map out of the sunken city, was ambushed by the Illuminati's old father Ward. Not only did he die at the hands of old Ward, but he also took possession of the map and the blood sacrifice seal. Loki believed his death was definitely connected to Prince Liu. Perhaps, like old Ward, he was also an Illuminati member. But the most urgent thing now was to find a way back to the surface. Loki turned and looked again at the red statue in the center of the room. Now it seemed utterly strange that it was there. Outside the city, perhaps there were fires burning, it was almost pitch black. This was the only spot in the city with sufficient light. Clearly, when Moyiquin was drawing the map, he had brought every item in the city to this room for detailed mapping. So the question arises, why is this thing still standing here, even after the entire book has been used up? Hesitantly, Loki sat down at his workbench again, discarded the letter, and flipped open volume 5 of a general map of the world, which detailed every detail of the sunken city. On the last page, Loki found an introduction to this statue, stone sculpture of the bloody creator. This stone sculpture stands in the center of the Lord's Hall of the sunken city. Standing 1.42 meters tall and weighing 112 kilograms, it dates back to the time of the ancient gods, when Nuwa mended the sky. According to my humble opinion, this item must have been brought with the bloody creator upon his arrival in Kyushu through the rift in the sky. Why did he carry the stone sculpture? After extensive research by pre-Kinkigan practitioners and my own meticulous investigation, I believe there are two reasons. 1. All outer gods descended upon Kyushu to spread their faith. Outer gods are different from the new gods that have emerged in modern times. All new gods, such as the Holy Lord, who died and revived, and lived and died again. The Fire Lord of Zoroastrianism, and even Odin, the god-king worshipped by the hairy barbarians of the far north, possess the ability to manifest divine power. However, the ancient gods rarely reveal their true forms to mortals. They spread their faith through the worship of their statues. I speculate that the blood-colored creator stone sculpture is a creation with this ability. Many red giants carry this object. The Pre-Kinki cultivators destroyed all of the blood-colored creator stone sculptures when they destroyed this city. I only discovered these two remnants in a secluded and remote location. Secondly, I discovered that this stone sculpture possesses the ability to break through space-time barriers and travel through time and space. Beneath the statue, Moyiquin meticulously depicted the 1-inch square, blood sacrifice seal, using almost as much space as the statue itself. The blood-colored creator seal was a tribute presented to the King of Kin by the blood-colored creator, thousands of years ago. However, according to my analysis, this object is part of the blood-colored creator stone sculpture. Entering the sunken city using the blood sacrifice seal alone is extremely complex. Entrants must choose the right time and find the right star alignment within the lesser cold sea. The bright moon and the 4 stars will then heat the seawater with their radiance, allowing it to accumulate energy. The fog will rise for over 10 days before the waters within the lesser cold sea accumulate enough energy for a mortal to use the blood sacrifice seal to part the waters, revealing a passage into the underwater city. Entering the city this way is extremely tedious and requires considerable luck. The Crimson Creator clan originally intended this to save the King's dignity while also avoiding conflict. The seawater passage only lasts for a day. After a day, the waters recede, and even the most powerful key refining masters of the pre-Kin period are unable to separate the waters and bring them to the surface. However, they had no idea what kind of people these key refining masters were. They still couldn't escape the fate of genocide. The only 2 Crimson Creator stone statues exist, one in my workshop, the other in a coastal cave in the Kingdom of Northumbria, England. Activating the stone statue requires the seal of blood sacrifice in my hand. Therefore, even if a herdsman stumbles upon it, they can't use it. Seeing this, Loki couldn't help but shake his head. After searching high and low, it's easy to find. He displayed the seal of blood sacrifice, in his hand and gazed at the blood-colored stone sculpture of the Creator, not far in front of him. He sighed, then laughed heartily. Chapter 24 The Coast of Northumbria. English Isles, Kingdom of Northumbria. Lindisfarne Abbey. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your heavenly Father forgive your trespasses. Outside, a torrential downpour had been falling for a day and a night. Jerome remained hunched over his desk, gently dipping his brush into the heavy gold ink, his eyes wide and focused. The Lord prayed for his executioners. Father, forgive them, for they do not know. He meticulously sketched, not daring to slack off. In those days, before the advent of printing, every copy of the Gospel of the Lord was completed by hand scribes like Jerome, who both wrote and drew. Back then, copying books was no easy task. Any Catholic believer who even picked up a brush dipped in gold dust had to undergo years of study. Jerome's teacher was a renowned cardinal, Saint Eusebius, sent to the English Isles by the Roman Catholic Church. Saint Eusebi, a chosen one specializing in the path of faith, was said to have reached the sequence 3 prophet. After arriving in the English Isles, he predicted numerous locust plagues and droughts, and accurately and effectively organized the evacuation of his followers before disaster struck, minimizing losses. Although the English Isles were still divided among 7 kingdoms, thanks to Eusebi's presence, nearly all of the 7 monarchs believed in the holy bishop. For years, he traveled across the 7 nations, healing the wounded and spreading the gospel, earning him even greater popularity than the monarchs themselves. Numerous nobles and lords contributed manpower and funds to the construction of numerous holy bishop churches. Driven by popular outreach, the holy bishop's faith began to spread rapidly throughout the English Isles. Everyone knew the 12 saints enshrined in the holy bishop church, their faces more familiar to most residents than their own family and friends. Going to church on weekends, breathing days to listen to the gospel recitation became an almost indispensable part of their lives. This faith was not acquired in vain. Like Valhalla, the Holy Lord Christ also passed down 5 paths of advancement for the people. War, law, faith, holy light, justice. These were the primary methods for the inhabitants of the English Isles to cultivate their magic after ascending to the status of chosen one. Unlike the Viking warriors in Valhalla who drank potions to draw the gaze of the gods in the face of death, the Holy Lord's disciples advanced through sequence level by gaining the power of faith. The most convenient way to gain the power of faith was through preaching. Copying a book, having it reverently read, would naturally lead the Holy Lord to notice it. Building a church and attracting worshippers was even greater. The Holy Lord's followers all took on the mission of preaching. To spread the Holy Lord's gospel, they generously donated their wealth to the church and aided the suffering poor. They were willing to give their all. Jerome quietly worked at his desk, drawing. He practiced a relatively uncommon justice sequence within the Holy Lord. As a disciple of the saint, many people couldn't understand why he would engage in such a lowly task. With the mighty support of Eusebius, he could easily secure a position as a bishop. Wearing his robes and preaching doctrine every day, he found a comfortable life and quickly cultivated the power of faith. Even if he didn't want to be a bishop, he could become a preacher, a church asset collector, or even join the Crusaders. All these options were preferable to working tirelessly at his desk, which left him with blurry eyes and aching backs. The church would then seize a significant portion of the revenue from his meticulously drawn atlases. Many of Jerome's contemporaries who had joined the saint's tutelage had risen to prominence, but he remained penniless. Yet, he cared little for others' opinions. In Jerome's view, people of different backgrounds served the Holy Lord in their own unique ways. His way was copying books. He loved the feel of his brush on papyrus and the creation of various gospel paintings depicting the heavens. While copying books, he felt his soul at peace, escaping the turmoil of the world and devoting himself to serving the Holy Lord without distraction. It was late, and the rain was still pouring outside. His colleagues, who had been copying scriptures by hand, had gone to their rooms for bed, leaving Jerome alone in his studio. He closed his eyes for a moment, then dipped his brush in gold ink again, intending to finish this page before returning to bed. The 10 Commandments. 1. Thou shalt have no other gods except the Lord. As he wrote these words, his hand suddenly trembled for no apparent reason. A drop of heavy gold ink fell onto the text he was about to copy, the rich ink shattering into 8 pieces on the papyrus. It was like a drop of blood falling from mid-air. Jerome blinked hard, staring at the scene in disbelief. He had been copying scriptures by hand for a full decade. He couldn't remember the last time he had accidentally spilled ink. The sight of a drop of ink landing on the once beautiful, clean text was like a fly landing on a piece of white bread. The bishop gave me the task of writing the final text for the youngest daughter of the King of Kent. This page is filled with gold. It would be a shame to waste even a single drop of ink. The brush gently touched the golden drop of ink, and with just 3 strokes, Jerome transformed it into a golden flower blooming at the foot of the page. With a slight shake of his head, he dipped his brush in ink again and continued copying 2. Thou shalt not worship idols 3. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord, Jehovah, in vain 4. Holy is the Sabbath 5. Honor thy father and thy mother. One by one, Jerome smoothly reached the last of the 10 commandments 10. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbors. The next word was 1, a simple one. But at that moment, a thunderclap suddenly exploded in the gloomy sky. Jerome's wrist trembled uncontrollably, and ink splattered all over the page. What had happened to me? Last year in Kent, even during an earthquake, I had managed to copy the entire text without moving a muscle. The earth shook, and the sky and the ground trembled, but my hand remained steady. What's going on today? He frantically gazed out the window at the gloomy sky, and unexpectedly discovered that amidst the gushing plasma, behind the dark clouds, there seemed to be a towering giant swinging a hammer. Bursts of lightning gushed out from the hammer in his hand, with a deafening explosion. What is this? He turned around in shock and anger, and 2 huge crows flew in from the window. They stood on the scripture he had just copied, staring at him with their dark eyes and beaks. The 2 bird beaks curved into an upward arc, and the expression on their faces seemed to be smiling at him. Chapter 25, Patriarch Francis. On this stormy night, Loki, who had just returned to land from the seabed via the bloody creator statue, also witnessed Odin's manifestation. One by one, the 11 of them emerged from the portal shown from the crimson stone sculpture's brow. Loki looked back at the holographic-like device, a host of unexpected associations forming in his mind. Why does this thing look so much like a technological artifact? His brain was completely different from that of the medieval indigenous peoples of this world. After 9 years of compulsory education and a thorough study of science fiction masterpieces like The Three-Body Problem, Loki's intuition told him that this outer god, the bloody creator, resembled a real technological civilization. While old Valder's use of the blood sacrifice seal to part the seawater might seem like magic, it was also supported by some theoretical basis. The thick fog rising from the sea is caused by the energy projected by the moonlight and stars onto the surface, heating the water. This energy then accumulates within the water, expanding the surface in a manner similar to the force. There seems to be a scientific principle of energy conservation in this text. Then there's the blood mist illusionary world I entered after consuming the ancient god's inner elixir. The bizarre human transformation process there is remarkably similar to the genetic engineering performed by those mad scientists in my previous life. And while I haven't seen any living black fallen titans, each one is identical in height, size, and arm length. Normally born humans are unlikely to be precisely shaped like a single mold. These fallen titans seem like they could be used to generate chemical weapons. Finally, there's the warp gate I used to escape the ocean floor. My new body, I'm afraid, holds many unknown secrets. Leave the black iron we found on the seabed here, and leave 3 brothers to guard the cave entrance. The treasures within this cave are more valuable than all our loot, especially this blood-colored statue. With this, we can use the mark of blood sacrifice to return to the sunken city at any time. There are still many unexplored areas and untapped resources within that city. Captain Sartre selected 3 warriors from the formation, while the other 7 gathered around Loki. I just saw a city not far away. There's a building with a wooden cross, that's the Holy Cathedral. Seeing the Holy Cathedral, we can now be almost certain we've reached the rich islands of England. The surrounding Viking warriors high-fived in celebration, feeling a sudden surge of pride as the first Vikings to set foot on this land. Unfortunately, we don't have many men this time. 7 of us are entering the city, and our goal must be clear. We will plunder the most valuable parts. With this, Loki led his Viking warriors out of the cave. Amidst a raging storm, lightning flashed from the dark clouds, briefly illuminating the distant town. He pointed to the tall spire. Look, that's the church. There are only 7 of us. So this time, we must avoid fighting as much as possible, especially avoiding involving the common people. No one may draw their sword and kill innocent civilians without my order. Do you understand, Loki reiterated this point 3 times amid the pouring rain. The nearby city wasn't really a city so much as the smallest village in the Red Kingdom of his previous life. However, even the smallest Red Kingdom village must have at least 2,000 people living within it. He had only 7 men. Forget 2,000 living people. Even if 2,000 pigs fought against 8 of his men, they wouldn't necessarily be able to defeat them, even if they wielded their weapons until they were exhausted. If they were caught in a sea of people, their 8 lives would evaporate faster than drops of water under the scorching sun. With this in mind, Loki laid out a detailed advance plan. Remember, make smart use of the ropes you hold. If a fight is necessary, try to approach the enemy silently from behind and eliminate them within 2 strikes. The heavy rain may muffle some of the shouting, but once a stalemate ensues, the screams will surely awaken the sleeping masses. Remember, we have no ships yet. The church raid yielded only the necessary benefits. The ultimate goal is to seize the gold and find a ship suitable for ocean voyages. Winter is approaching, and we still have over 160 people in our village to feed. Do you understand? Seeing his subordinates nod, Loki took up his blood-red axe, and the Viking warriors behind him each took up the massive black daggers plucked from the fallen titan. Amidst the rumbling thunder, they marched towards the nearby city. This was the first time the people of Coldwater Village had set foot on English soil. Despite the icy rain pelting down on them, everyone felt their blood boiling. For above the clouds, Odin raised his hammer, silently watching them. Clap, clap, clap. Ignoring the drenching downpour, Jerome pounded furiously on the abbot's bedroom. He had been banging for over 10 minutes when he heard the sound of shuffling footsteps. The carved wooden door swung open, and Francis Dijon, abbot of Lindisfarne Abbey, his nearly 200-pound frame, squeezed out from behind. His face flushed, and he was still chewing. "Abbot, have you been drinking?" The abbot, who had just finished a bellyful of beer with barbecued meat, was already furious at Jerome's late-night knocking. He was glad he hadn't called in the gypsy girls from the neighboring town for a friendly exchange. If someone else had been inside, wouldn't this idiot's banging have given them away? "My esteemed Monsignor Jerome, don't you see what time it is? Can't we discuss this tomorrow, Master? I see signs of the apocalypse." "What the hell are you talking about?" The alcohol had severely numbed Francis's mind. He tried to close the door without hesitation, but Jerome blocked his way. "I saw the day of judgment. Christ said that when the day of judgment arrives, dark clouds will cover the sky, and the sun will become a lightless void, the moon will disappear, and the stars will fall from the sky." "Oh my God, you've done enough." Master Francis hadn't heard such blasphemies in decades. He knew what kind of man Jerome was. He didn't drink, didn't indulge in women, and was as upright as the saints described in books. But so what? In the eyes of most monks in the monastery, Jerome was an absolute loser. As a direct disciple of Saint Eusebius, he had a golden start within the papacy. But what happened? He misplayed a good hand. After more than 20 years of struggling, he achieved nothing and ended up living in a remote, impoverished area of Lindisfarne. In his 30s, he had no wife or property. Instead, like the new apprentices who had just entered the monastery, he spent his days copying books for a living. Sooner or later, such people will go astray, Francis had told the congregants the day Jerome entered the Lindisfarne monastery. And today, this guy had truly gone mad. "I saw a god standing behind the clouds, wielding a hammer. When his hammer fell, lightning erupted from it. And I also saw a giant beast emerging from beneath the sea. Its maw is gaping, and it's approaching us." "Enough," Francis shouted with disdain. "Brother Jerome, you cultivate the path of justice, not faith. The divine power bestowed upon you by the path of justice doesn't include summoning gods or prophesying. If these words were spoken today by the Saint Eusebius, I might believe them to some degree. But you, boy, what right do you have to play divination for me?" Having said this, Francis had completely lost all patience. He raised his stout short legs and kicked Jerome out of the door, slamming it shut. "Damn. I wasted my precious sleep in a thunderstorm," Francis muttered, crawling into the warmth of his bed. Rainy days are so comfortable to sleep on, and it wasn't long before he fell into a deep dream. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.